Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was a king of Aburame clan in Harry Potter. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. It was a cold morning in fall when Shibuya Flat. Aburame walked outside his clan's door and found the child. It was little over a year old, and could have passed for an Uchiha with how pale it was. With it was a note, in Romanji of all things. Take the little freak, we never wanted him. He's your problem now. Curious as to why someone would leave an innocent child at their doorstep, they had the reputation for being rather disturbing because of the hives they had inside their bodies. He took it in. When the infant opened its eyes, he knew without a shadow of a doubt that his wife would adopt the child. It wasn't like they couldn't afford to. And the child was still young enough to inherit the clan bugs. What is it, dear? Someone left this on our doorstep. She took one look at the child and fell in love. What should we name him? Shino. She nodded in agreement. It was a fine name for a shinobi. And few people would ask where the child had come from, because there were a select few people who willingly associated with the Aburame clan. As far as the village knew, they had hidden the pregnancy. All that was left was dealing with the Hokage and forging the birth certificate. Someone was idiotic enough to leave an infant on your doorstep in the beginning of November, asked the Hokage, incredulous. Shibi remained silent. I take it you and your wife wish to adopt the child. Should the infant prove to be an orphan, I believe he would make an excellent addition to our clan. Sarutobi looked at the man knowingly. Sometime during the last shinobi war, his wife had taken a hit that the doctors told her would render her incapable of safely bearing a child. There was absolutely nothing they could do to fix the problem, unless they could find Tsunade. The fact that Shibi was all too willing to adopt a child abandoned on the doorstep didn't surprise him in the least. Very well, we may as well start the paperwork. What story are you going to give the council? My wife decided to hide the pregnancy, and we wanted to wait and make sure the infant would be able to survive before announcing him. The Hokage could believe that easily enough. The fact was that the last child they had was rather weak, and had died within a few months. It would only appear natural that they would rather wait before introducing a second child. The next month, Shibi was rather proud to announce his son Shino. A child which seemed to handle the clan bugs with ease. The other clans were rather shocked to hear about the child, but once he gave his explanation there were no further comments about the matter. Time skipped 6 years. Shino had grown into a healthy, if somewhat pale, 7-year-old. He didn't really mind the way people shot him freaked out looks. His father had explained the reason why civilians and shinobi alike thought them creepy. To be honest, Shibi found the fact that Shino tended to find snakes in his bed rather worrying. Particularly when the child had mentioned the fact that he could speak to the snakes. Shibi merely requested that he keep that particular ability to himself, since it would only cause the other children to avoid him even more. Shino understood that, and went to play anyway. When he first entered the academy, Shino found something rather odd about the teachers. While he was used to getting the looks of wary respect, he was also aware that the teachers shot an entire different look at one of his new classmates. The boy was blonde, loud and rather mischievous. Yet the teachers acted as though he were the Kyuubi or something. Well, almost all of them. Iruka at least gave the boy sympathetic looks. Shino wondered why, and decided to observe the situation before he did anything. What he saw shocked him more than he would like to admit. Naruto Uzumaki was the class pariah. Nae was willing to be friends with the boy, even though there was nothing Shino saw that would cause such a thing. The parents always removed their children whenever Naruto was around, and refused to let them play. It was a rather lonely existence. Father, I have noted a rather disturbing trend surrounding one of my classmates. People seem to avoid him as actively as they do us. Only they don't bother to hide their dislike of the boy. Quote, Shibi stopped, and looked at Shino. His son was the most observant child he had ever seen. For him to say that meant he noticed something was very wrong, and he intended to correct it whether or not Shibi said it was all right. What is the child's name? Uzumaki Naruto. The only teacher I have seen who doesn't make his life difficult is Iruka-sensei. Shibi paused. Naruto Uzumaki was the name of the Kyuubi container. While he knew full well that if Shino associated with the boy he would be avoided more than usual, he also knew that his son was very stubborn. If he wanted to be friends with Naruto, he would go through with it no matter what Shibi said. Let me confirm your findings. Tomorrow I will stand in for you at the school. If you are correct, then you may befriend the boy. Yes, father, said Shino. It was as close to a yes that he would get that day. When Shibi returned that day, he was astounded to find that Shino wasn't overstating the problem. Every adult alive during the attack was actively preventing their children from getting close to Naruto. As if they feared he would infect them with the Kyuubi by befriending the boy. Seeing the way Naruto was treated, Shino hadn't been joking when he said that the people barely treated him with any civility. He made up his mind. Shino looked up at his father, who said clearly, "Why? Oh, you may befriend the Uzumaki child, but please, try not to get caught pranking anyone." Shino grinned, and somehow Shibi knew without a doubt that he had just signed the village's death sentence. Naruto looked up from his worn-out book, struggling to read the letters. Iruka tried to help him read, but he usually got called away during their private lessons. So when a shadow appears behind him, he turned and looked. Shino Aburame, the only kid in the class that people avoided only with less hatred in their eyes, was right behind him. "Are you struggling with the text?" he asked. "Yeah, kind. Hard to read when you can't understand the kanji. Would you like some help in learning how?" asked Shino. Naruto stared in disbelief. Someone was willing to help him. "Sure," he said with enthusiasm. Shino took time out of his lunch to help Naruto learn how to read. To his surprise, Naruto was a rather fast learner, if given a chance. The two could often be found debating the training scrolls that Shino checked out from the academy library. Scrolls Naruto had been unable to access for reasons he never fully understood. Even though it was well known Shino had become close friends with Naruto. The librarian knew better than to antagonize one of the noble clans. That was just asking for trouble. "Get back here, you brats," yelled one of the Chunin they had nailed with a rather inventive use of glue and feather tags. Naruto grinned at his best friend Shino, who, as always, was almost impossible to read if you didn't know the signs. Naruto was one of the extremely rare people who tell what an Aburame was feeling without being told. He was also one of the few outside the clan who dared to hang out with Shino. Ever since Shino had initially approached Naruto, the two had become instant friends. Shino even assisted Naruto in pranking the village. It was their way of getting revenge for all the crap Naruto had to put up with on a daily basis. Shino was quite sure that if he hadn't become friends with the boy, there was a very good chance Naruto would have had to live on ramen noodles and expired food. As it was, Naruto was a frequent visitor at the Aburame mansion. Shino led them straight to the forest area. He had noted that none of the people who chased them ever dared to follow them once they entered that particular forest. When he asked his father, he learned it had a rather disturbing reputation, and the only time people ever went into it was during the Chunin exams. Well, almost never. There was one crazy kunoichi who would follow them, but they lost her with the help of the snakes that lived in the area. Naruto never thought to ask why Shino was able to talk to snakes when his clan was best known for their insect hives. "Good thing Crazy Lady wasn't there today," said Naruto, taking a breather. "For the last time, her name is Anko. And it's not a coincidence that she wasn't there. I copied her work schedule so we wouldn't run into her unless we're really bored," said Shino. Naruto grinned. They didn't even flinch when they heard hissing below them. They were so used to escaping into the forest that the snakes knew them by scent. "Have fun, boys," Shino grinned, and hissed back, "Glue and feather tags. I'm almost certain another dart board has been added to the Chunin lounge with our pictures on it." The snake hissed, laughing. E2, hatchlings, as the serpents called them, brought the snakes no end of amusement. Once they had caught their breath and made very sure the coast was clear, they ran straight to the Aburame mansion. Shibi was waiting for them, amused. "Are you aware of the new pictures on the Chunin lounge dart board?" he asked. Shino looked at Naruto. "Told you they would add new ones. Good thing we left them something to throw at. The last pictures they had were rather ruined from the amount of kunai they had thrown at it. Don't forget that large number of senbon. I didn't know you could ruin a dar. Board with that many lodged in the wall. Shibi looked at them amused. Dinner is in 10. Go get cleaned up. Yes sir, they said in unison. Shibi watched his son and his friend run to the bathroom. It was rather amusing that the heir to the clan wasn't even a blood member, and yet acted more responsibly than the Uchiha heir. The only real complaint the other clans had was the fact that Shino was rather good at pranking the village. Being friends with Naruto only made his pranks worse. Shino was his pride and joy. He almost dreaded the day when he had to tell the boy about where he really came from, and how hard the boy might take it. Shino stared at the mirror. Once again, his green eyes stared back. He had once asked another clan member what color his parents' eyes were, because they never removed their sunglasses even when indoors, and found that for some reason, he hadn't inherited their eyes. He was rather surprised to find out that he was the only person in the clan with green eyes, and the only one in the village with emerald-colored eyes. Jewel-colored eyes weren't that unusual. Naruto had sapphire-colored eyes. It bothered Shino that his skin tone was 2 shades paler than his parents'. The only people with similar coloring were the Uchiha. The questions in his head were bothering him so much that he found it hard to sleep. Only the buzz of his hive could get him to even sleep. And it was still hard coming. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. So he confronted his parents over breakfast during one of the times Naruto wasn't sleeping over. Shibi stared at his son, then sighed. He knew this day was coming, but he didn't have to like it though. Shino, you were adopted. The simple fact of that statement stopped Shino cold. He was adopted. That actually explained more than it didn't. How? When? When you were 1.5 years, I found you outside on our doorstep. You were so young that I couldn't in good conscience leave you at the orphanage. Your moth, and I decided to adopt you and claim you as our own. Why was I left on a doorstep? Shibi brought out an old paper, written in Romanji. Shino always had a naturally knack towards languages. I knew you had to be an orphan, because no real parent would dare call you a freak. No one has ever come asking about a child with green eyes and a scar above his right eye. Shino sat down. It was a lot to take in all at once. Then he looked at his father and asked, "Am I still an Aburame?" Shibi smiled. "Nothing has changed between us. You are still our son, even if we didn't give birth to you." Shino nodded. That he could accept. No matter what anyone said, he was still Shino Aburame, bane of the village. He went to class, and continued on his day as if his world were still the same. Only Naruto knew something was off. Like a good friend, he didn't press the matter. Shino would tell him when he was ready. Shino was eager to try the Genin exam. He had made it a point not to get promoted without Naruto with him. This was their 3rd time taking the Genin exam, and Naruto was worrying. Next week would make or break his lifelong dream of becoming Hokage. The main problem was that one of the jutsu happened to be rather difficult for Naruto to use. Shino had issues with it as well, but he could always use one of the clan techniques which made a clone out of his personal hive. I can't use that little chakra. It either comes out wrong or it fails spectacularly. Naruto complained. Perhaps you are not a genjutsu user. Maybe father will know of a way to make them solid. Naruto stopped, and thought about it. With the amount of chakra I have, I think that may be my only option. Shino nodded. Naruto had the highest amount of raw chakra in the class, followed closely by Sasuke, Uchiha and Shino. That fact had shocked their teachers, since everyone knew the hive inside an Aburame made it rather difficult to use the higher level ninjutsu. They made up that fact with their bugs. Naruto and Shino made their way to the Aburame mansion, and when asked about a way to make clones solid, Shibi gave them a look. If this is a way to learn a stronger jutsu to impress your teachers, he left the end hanging. Naruto can't do the regular clones. It takes too little chakra and he simply doesn't have such a fine-tuned control of his. I can probably get away with a Kikai clone, but I have trouble with the regular clones as well. Shibi stared at his son. He had known Shino had a larger than normal amount of chakra for the clan, but he hadn't known that it was causing him problems with the lower level techniques. Fine, there's one technique that I know of, but it's a Chunin level 1. I can only manage 1 or 2 at best, he admitted. Shibi showed Naruto the signs, and set the boys to work. Much to his shock and amusement, Naruto not only managed to pull off the technique within 2 hours, but he was able to bring out at least 30 clones. He could see why the boy had trouble learning the weaker techniques. Shino surprised him the most, because he was able to bring out 10 clones of his own. That could be a problem. People already suspected he wasn't a full Aburame. Despite being the son of the clan head, if it wasn't for the fact that Shino had an innate knack for controlling his Kikai bugs, people would start wondering whose clan he belonged to. Then again, odd things always happened around Shino. They just took his strangeness in stride these days. Shibi decided to go visit the Hokage and make a suggestion for the Genin teams. He didn't doubt that the boys would pass the test. Hello Aburame-san, what can I do for you? I was going to make a suggestion for the Genin teams this year. Shino and Naruto. He nodded. They make a rather good team. Any recommendations for the third member? He asked. The Hyuga heir. She seems to be the only kunoichi in that class with any real sense. The others tend to hang off of the Uchiha's every word. Haru. No, should be avoided. She has a nasty tendency to hit Naruto when annoyed, and Yamanaka would only upset the hive inside Shino with her shrieking. The Hokage took that under advisement. He was well aware of the little training tricks Shino had been teaching Naruto to identify specific scents. They could make a formidable capture and interrogation team if given a chance and an instructor who could deal with Naruto without glaring at him. The only issue was whether the boys would pass this year. Iruka called Naruto, almost dreading the fact that he would have to watch Naruto flunk again. It wasn't his fault that the exam included a jutsu that required so little chakra that Naruto couldn't do it properly. Naruto stood proudly before them, almost grinning like a fox. He put his hands into he proper seal like Shibi had taught him, and said, "Shadow Clone Jutsu." Iruka's mouth dropped, as Naruto created no less than 10 perfect shadow clones. There was only one issue. Mizuki was the other proctor. Pass? He asked, hoping Mizuki wasn't going to act like an idiot. Mizuki sullenly agreed to pass Naruto. The brat had outdid his classmates, except for the Aburame kid who had done a bug clone. Chapter 2. Naruto bounced out of the room with a smirk that sent shivers down the spines of everyone but Shino. The headband on his head only made his classmates groan in horror. Shino, however, grinned. Did they flip out? Iruka's mouth dropped. I don't think Mizuki-sensei was very happy about passing me though. He's one of the idiots. Forget about him. Naruto grinned, and then pulled out a book. Thanks to Shino, he had a real love of just sitting down to read. Sometimes, he would go to the Aburame mansion, find a tree, and just sit down to read. None of the clan ever noticed him during those times. Naruto ignored the parents that picked up their children. Shino's mom and dad liked him well enough, so why should he care what they thought? They thought Shino was creepy anyway, because of his bugs. How does ramen at Ichiraku sound? Asked Shino. You bet. Who's buying? Shino smirked. Mizuki is. I saw that look he shot you when you walked out, so I nicked his wallet. Naruto grinned evilly. Shino would sometimes steal the wallets of the teachers who treated him badly, and they would eat their fill of ramen in revenge. Shibi never bothered to correct that behavior, since it was a good way to practice his ninja skills. Later that night, Mizuki came to Naruto with what he made out to be a relatively harmless prank. Naruto, without Shino to help guide his pranks, fell for the trick. The moment Shino overheard what Naruto had done, he immediately went to his side. You do realize you stirred up an Aburame hive when you stole that? Naruto looked up from the scroll, and realized Shino happened to be there. Check this out. First jutsu on the scroll is the shadow clone. Shino, who realized this was likely the only chance he would ever get to look at the scroll while a genin, decided to join in. It wasn't long until Shino had a blank scroll and was copying down all the jutsu he found interesting. It took Iruka an hour to find Naruto, and Shino had hidden himself. It was unlikely the Chunin would realize he was there, or that they had taken jutsu off the scroll. The task of copying was much easier and faster thanks to a strange power Shino had. He merely had to touch the jutsu and a blank spot on the scroll, and the thing was copied. It would have taken hours otherwise. Shino was shocked to learn that Naruto was the container for the Kyuubi. Fortuna. Telly Naruto didn't believe for a minute that he was alone. He always had Shino to back him up, or help him get out of trouble. Naruto bolted, with Shino right behind him. Shino was beyond livid at the way Mizuki treated his friend. It was clear that the man was a traitor. He knew he could sick his entire hive without fearing his father's lecture. The fact that he hated Mizuki was only a bonus. Naruto finally paused, and the two listened into the conversation between instructors. Shino was thrilled to hear that the one instructor he didn't actively dislike not only cared about Naruto, he actually viewed him as a fellow shinobi. Which was why the minute the two finally revealed their presence, Iruka was surprised that Shino had been there the entire time. Shino was more than happy to let loose nearly 100,000 bugs on Mizuki. Iruka was shocked to learn that Shino not only had bugs to steal chakra from his enemies, but he also had a few that healed. Shino was the only one in the clan with enough chakra to have them though. Those particular bugs ate 4 times the amount of the regular ones, and most Aburame couldn't handle more than 10 of them. It was why they were relatively unused. Once Shino drained Mizuki of any chakra he had, Naruto finished him off with a ridiculous amount of clones. "Are you alright, Iruka-sensei?" asked Shino. "How long have you been here?" "I arrived 50 minutes before you did. I heard everything." Iruka didn't look happy about that. Then Shino decided to trust the man as much as Naruto clearly did. Then again, if Naruto can make friends with someone who's not an Aburame by blood, then who's to say that I can't make friends with the loudest idiot in the village? Iruka and Naruto stared. "What? I'm adopted," repeated Shino. And he did something that had them in complete shock. He took off his famous sunglasses and revealed the clearest emerald eyes they had ever seen. No one else in the village has the same clear green eyes. "Believe me, I've checked. Father told me that someone left me on the doorstep 11.5 years ago." "So that's what was bothering you a few years ago," said Naruto in surprise. "Besides, Naruto is one of the rare people who have been able to tell whenever I'm upset. I'm not about to drop a friend like that just because of some demon." Iruka smiled, and told them that he would take them both out to ramen once someone picked Mizuki up. The two boys looked at each other, and snickered. Iruka shot them a look. "What did you do?" he asked. Shino tossed Iruka a wallet. It looked familiar. Then he realized who it belonged to. "You two were the ones who stole his wallet." "Iruka-sensei, you're the only teacher in that school whose wallet I haven't stolen," said Shino deadpan. Suddenly, why all the complaints by his fellow teachers about losing their wallets made absolute sense. And why he was the only person who hadn't suffered the problem of finding it later with no cash left in it. "You see, Iruka-sensei, whenever one of the teachers had been particularly cruel or mean to Naruto, I stole their wallet. I had hoped they would take the hint to leave Naruto alone, but unfortunately none of them ever got the message. Yeah, and I couldn't very well say anything because then they would think I did it," said Naruto. Shino was rather eager to meet his team. He only hoped he was on one with Naruto, and not Haruno. The pink-haired demon was a little too violent to be on the same team as his friend, especially without him to prevent her from giving Naruto a concussion. It had happened once, and as far as Shino had anything to say about it, it would never happen again. Shibi was rather amused by his son's eagerness. He knew full well that the Hokage was going to put Shino and Naruto on the same team. The only question was who else would be stuck with their insanity. At least he had comfort in knowing that whichever instructor landed the boys, they wouldn't be biased against Naruto. Kakashi, Asuma and Kurenai were 3 of the few Chunin who didn't hate the kid on sight. And since one of the noble clans were on the team, there wasn't a chance the Hokage would stick them with subpar teachers. Have fun, and remember, whoever you get stuck with is a comrade. You aren't allowed to use the Kikai bugs on them. Shino stared at his father. Not even a little chakra leeching. If I hear you drained anyone dry again, I will have your missions restricted to catching that damn cat or cleaning after the Inuzuka dogs. Mizuki was a traitor who tried to get Naruto killed. I stand by my actions, said Shino firmly. Which is the only reason you're not grounded from your calligraphy class, said Shibi. Shino winced. Calligraphy was one of his few normal hobbies, and he Teacher didn't shirk away from him because of his bugs. Instead he would give Shino talks about bugs that could be used for ink. It was Shino's favorite class. Shino ran into Naruto, who cheerfully greeted him as if nothing had happened. "Any idea who we'll get?" he asked. "Not a clue. Hopefully we'll get the same team. And Haruno will be placed far, far from us," said Shino. "I don't get why you hate Sakura-chan so much. She's a violent, Uchiha-obsessed stalker, with sociopath tendencies, and she hates you. What more do I need? She's more likely to fawn over Sasuke than to actually get a mission done. Frankly, I think Yamanaka-san is a better kunoichi than her." Fate clearly had it in for Shino, because Sakura happened to be passing by and heard his comment. He sensed the impending fist, and without realizing it, the two disappeared with a crack of displaced air. "What the hell just happened?" asked Naruto, slightly dizzy. "My Haruno detector went off. She was about to hit me on the head. You know how I feel about her punches." It was then that Sakura appeared, having guessed where Shino would go. "Aburame!" she shrieked. There was a reason why Shino was usually quiet unless Naruto was around. Loud noises tended to get his hive worked up, and since he was already trying to avoid Sakura, it wasn't really a surprise to Naruto what happened next. Shino's hive reacted. Sakura took one look at the bugs and backed away from the corner so fast that Shino knew if he had blinked he would have missed it. "Haruno, there is a very good reason, aside from the fact that you two are fangirls of the Uchiha, that I never sit anywhere near you or Ino. Loud noises bother them greatly. It's true. I heard your cousin complain about that when one of the Genin set off that explosive tag near the mansion," said Naruto. Iruka walked in, took one look at Sakura hugging the wall and the hive, and guessed what happened. "Shino, were you being unusually blunt around Sakura again? I was talking to Naruto on the way here, and didn't realize she was walking down the street," he answered blandly. "Right. Could you recall the hive?" "Hi." The insects went back, mostly because the danger had passed. Shino and Naruto took their usual spot, and waited for the team announcements. "Team 8, you will be Naruto Uzumaki, Shino Aburame and Hinata Hyuga. Your Chunin instructor is Kurenai." "Thank Kami," said Shino. Sasuke looked relieved too, though he was a bit annoyed that Shino had lucked out. It would have been amusing to see how the two reacted to Sakura being on their team. Then he ran that scenario through his head and winced. Sakura wouldn't last a week before Shino drove her completely insane. Shino had made it very clear over the years how he felt about the girl. While he would work with her when forced, he wanted nothing to do with the harpy. The fact that she hated Naruto with a passion, and tended to give him rather large and painful bruises only made his dislike worse. Hinata also couldn't believe her luck. She had a major crush on Naruto, and Shino was her friend in calligraphy class, sometimes helping her out. Plus Kurenai sometimes let her crash on her couch whenever her father was acting more like a jerk than usual. So yes, she had definitely lucked out in concerns to her new team. Naruto was just happy to have Shino on the same team as him. "Likes, dislikes and dreams. We'll start with Blondie," said Kurenai. "I like ramen, books and pranks. I dislike the time it takes for the ramen to be done, and people who judge you without really getting to know you. My dream is to become Hokage." She looked at Shino. "I enjoy miso ramen, books, calligraphy, pranks, and collecting new bugs. I dislike abuse, people who try to hurt Naruto without really knowing him, and loud sounds. My dream is to one day find a one-of-a-kind insect." Interesting choices, thought Kurenai. She looked at Hinata. "I like calligraphy, practicing my jutsu and," she blushed, but decided to go straight to the second part. "I dislike people who judge you on sight, and violence without a good reason. My dream is to be a kunoichi like my mother," and she blushed even heavier and couldn't get it out. Shino was well aware of Hinata's crush on Naruto. Being observant had its perks. Fortunately, he liked Hinata enough not to mention that attraction to the blonde. "We'll meet at training ground 10. Be on time." "Yes ma'am," said Shino. He liked their instructor already. She didn't glare at Naruto for no reason, but was more indifferent than anything. Shino knew Asuma liked Naruto. After all, he was related to the third. And Kakashi. Shino once saw him protect Naruto from a civilian. Shino arrived early, to scout the area. He ended up finding a few snakes around, and chatted with them a bit. They weren't surprised he could talk, since the ones in the Forest of Death liked to chat with their smaller cousins. According to the snakes in the forest, they liked his scent. He smelled of nature, instead of humanity. Hinata arrived next, and she blushed when she saw Shino. Morning, Hinata-chan. Morning, Shino-kun. Looking for new bugs. Any bug here is probably already in my hive. I was talking to the snakes. Snakes? She asked. Yeah, they're surprisingly rather chatty. The only real downside is that they're mostly perverts. She decided not to comment. Chances were pretty good that Shino was speaking to a summon, though there were very few people in the village who bothered with snake summons after Orochimaru. Naruto showed up, yawning. Shino paused, and looked at him. Naruto, did you drink from expired milk again? I didn't check, said Naruto. My Kikai bugs tell me you will be on the toilet for the next few hours. You may need to get rid of your breakfast unless you want to get into trouble, said Shino. I didn't get much sleep last night. Some idiot was partying below my house. Need any help? Nah. I'll be back in a bit, said Naruto. Hinata looked at Shino with wide eyes. Expired milk. For reasons only Naruto may explain, the majority of the civilians that live in the village hate him. They take it out on him by forcing him to buy expired foods. Thankfully he has enough common sense to come to the mansion and eat with us, otherwise he would be living solely on ramen and whatever fruits he is currently growing in the apartment next door. Kurenai arrived 5 minutes later, and she didn't seem happy. Where's Naruto? He didn't realize he had drank expired milk this morning, and is getting rid of it before it becomes a problem, said Shino. Kurenai paused, and heard the sound. Right, once he's done we'll start. 10 minutes later Naruto was annoyed to learn they had one more test to pass before becoming an official team. When he learned it didn't involve a paper exam, he was all for it. Right, if it comes down to it, I could probably blackmail Kurenai to stay on the team. First we have to find her though. Naruto grinned, and held up the kunai Kurenai had thrown at him earlier. Apparently she had issues with loud people. Then again this was the woman who lived with one of the craziest people in the village. Alright, Naruto, get her sent. Hinata, you'll help me by being the early warning system. Once I get close enough I can place a tracker on her. They vanished. Kurenai was rather impressed. She was well aware of Naruto's nose, which was why she had stayed downwind of the team. Shino was clearly the leader, and knew each of their basic abilities well. Then again, she wasn't surprised to see the boy lead the others. The two boys were infamous in the Anbu headquarters, especially when Shino was leading the loud blonde one. The cursing they inspired in the Anbu lounge were legendary. Strangely enough, Enko absolutely adored the boys, particularly Shino. She stopped musing when she heard Naruto crash nearby. Unnoticed by the kunoichi, a small bug attached itself on her back. For the next 2 hours, she had to duck, dodge and avoid the genin. Things really took a turn for the worse when Shino caught her with his genjutsu. She really hadn't expected the kid to know anything nearly as disturbing as the vision he hit her with. From what she knew, the Aburame clan weren't that good with illusions. Shino was rather talented with them, and his intricate knowledge about ECTS only made his illusions much more realistic. She would have nightmares for a week after that though. If you're wondering what he did, he placed Kurenai under the illusion of flesh-eating beetles with her being in the pit with them. Think The Mummy Returns, in the scene where Ankh-se-Naman falls into the pit with the scarabs. She heard the alarm go off, and felt relieved beyond belief. Shino and Hinata had the 2 bells, and Naruto was grinning like the fox container he was. Alright team, you've passed. Chapter 3. Shino wasn't looking forward to today. After passing the test, Kurenai had them doing the most annoying chores. On the plus side, they were banned permanently from capturing Tora, the cat from hell, after Shino gave the fiend the worst case of fleas the feline had ever had. Apparently it had taken 2 entire weeks to finally get rid of them. And even then they returned for days at a time. Naruto laughed himself sick over that one. There was one good thing about being on a team with Hinata. Over the course of a few weeks, the girl was really coming out of her shell. Naruto's boisterous attitude and Shino's gentle support had the girl's confidence growing weekly. Kurenai proved to be an excellent teacher, particularly when it came to genjutsu. She had been very surprised to learn that Shino was a natural at using the art, though he had great difficulty holding it for more than an hour. The more intricate the illusion, the less time he could hold it. On the plus side, the team worked great together. Naruto had the strangest ability to bring them together, while Shino found ways to use their abilities to their full potential in a mission. Hinata was their healer. After dealing with a month of boring chores, they were finally given a Chunin rank mission. There was just one catch. The client was a drunk who was adept at pushing Naruto's buttons. Shibi, when he learned of where the mission was going to take place, decided to add to his son's hive. There were very few bugs that could thrive in the water. Shino took one look at the bugs and decided against adding them. When asked, his father was somewhat surprised at the answer. I don't want the fireflies to electrocute them by accident. Shino had, at Kurenai's suggestion, tested to see what his elemental type was. He had startled the woman greatly when she found out that he had two elemental types, with a minor in a third. Shino was good at fire and lightning jutsu, and was somewhat adept at wind. Naruto was good at wind as well, but had some ability in the other four. Hinata was an earth and water type user. Fine, but I expect to see at least 3 new insect species when you get back. Fair enough. Naruto, duck and cover, shouted Shino. They had barely been away from the village more than an hour. And already Shino had the worst migraine he had ever dealt with. Their client had not only lied about who was after him, but he had underranked the mission. And now they had to deal with rogue ninja after their blood. Shino silently sighed. Some days he really hated waking up. Hinata and Shino had made quick work of the two brothers, while Naruto guarded the client. Shino drained most of their chakra while Hinata sealed off their jutsu. It was an effective combo. Alright team, should we continue or go back? Asked Kurenai. Continue, but only if we get some backup. If we succeed I'm sure Mr. Chizuna's problem will have mostly been taken care of, said Shino. Naruto completely agreed. Unfortunately, Kurenai didn't have any summons on her, which meant they would have me problem getting word back to the village. Or so she thought. Shino sighed, then went into the forest and brought back a snake curled around his arm. Taka has agreed to deliver the message, though it could take a day or two before he can make it to the Anbu headquarters. Kurenai stared. Where did you get a poisonous snake that willingly delivers messages? I listened. When I found him I asked politely and he agreed. Snakes usually agree to reasonable demands if you can deal with listening to their perverted humor. Kurenai tied the message around the snake, and Taka slithered in the direction of Konoha. Every snake within a 20-mile radius of the village was aware of Anko Mitarashi and Shino. However, only one of the two could actually speak to the regular snakes. Back in the T&I department, Anko heard the hiss, and looked up from the evil paperwork. There was one of the more poisonous snakes in the vents, and it had a scroll with Kurenai's neat handwriting. Once she thanked the snake and fed it a mouse that she always kept on hand. To the horror of the other females in her section, she read the scroll, and ran straight to the Hokage. Anko, what's the rush? Asked Ibiki. She handed over the scroll, and upon reading it he went with her. Hello Anko, Ibiki. Hokage-sama, I just got a message from Kurenai that the client underrated the mission they are currently on. She's requesting backup. The Hokage stared at her, before reading the scroll. How did you get this? I wasn't aware she had a summoning contract. Kurenai wrote the message, but it was the Aburame brat who got it to me. At the sound of affection in her voice, the two men looked at her curiously. What? The kid likes snakes as much as I do, and he can talk to the big ones in Area 44. The Hokage pinched the bridge of his nose. Most of the other Genin teams wouldn't be able to handle this kind of mission, and the only one that would have even greater difficulty dealing with Shino's team. Sakura Haruno, Hiba Inuzuka and Sasuke Uchiha all had some issue with at least one of the members on the team. Sakura hated Naruto and Shino. Sasuke had a slight problem with bugs and disliked Naruto for the many times the boy pranked him, and Kiba was louder than Naruto was on his worst day. I can go sir, suggested Anko sweetly. Fine, you can go back Kurenai up. It's a better idea than sending one of the rookie teams, sighed the Hokage. She cheered, and went to get her usual bag to pack. She usually kept it by the door just in case. So what other ninja villages are there? Asked Shino. He was bored. There are several, but the most notable ones are Sand, Mist, Leaf, Rock, and Cloud. Each of them is led by a cage. The Hokage, Raikage, Tsuchikage, Mizuki and Kazekage, said Shino. How did you know about that? I read. It wasn't until they saw the half-completely bridge that Naruto finally said something. He had nearly frozen up during the fight, but years of pranking the Anbu with Shino had managed to get him moving. He half hoped to redeem himself, at least until Shino took it upon himself to cheer the boy up. Naruto, I would have frozen too if my hive hadn't been egging me on at the time. Really? He asked. My fireflies were buzzing more than normal, and gave me a shock the moment the puddles exploded. Shino, upon learning of his elemental specialty, had tried something new with his hive. It was rather amusing to see the look of complete shock on Kurenai's face when she found out that Shino had managed to get the fireflies in his hive to hold an electrical charge. Once or twice, Sasuke had paid Shino to shock his teacher with the bugs so the man would show up on time. To say Kakashi had gotten the point was an understatement. He had become paranoid of late whenever he saw a flying bug. For some strange reason, even though he was a lightning user too, Shino's spark actually hurt the man. Naruto laid the blame on the weird ability Shino sometimes displayed. Like the few times they had somehow appeared above the Aburame mansion during a prank. They always appeared without warning with a loud crack, to Shibi's displeasure. Over the weeks since becoming Genin, Shino had been experimenting with the odd ability, and had managed to figure out how to use it on command. Getting it to work properly without the crack was another story. Naruto was at least a bit more aware of his surroundings this time around. Though Shino could have done without the random kunai being thrown in his direction. Right as he was about to tell Naruto to stop, the boy accidentally alerted them to the fact they were about to be ambushed. Duck! Shouted Kurenai. A large blade flew over their heads, and Hinata barely got the client down in time to avoid his head being cut off. And then everything quickly went pear-shaped. Naruto, Shino and Hinata all took defensive stances around Tazuna. The man wisely kept his trap shut. Shino was the first to react to the man when he abruptly appeared behind them. His Kikai bugs turned the water clone into a puddle beneath their feet before the others registered his presence. The demon of the bloody mist had been somewhat impressed by the reaction time. Naruto, you and Hinata protect Tazuna while I assist Sensei, said Shino. Be careful Shino, said Hinata. Zabusa wasn't impressed with his bravado, Shino unleashed at least half of his fireflies, all with a rather potent electrical charge. The sparks sent off by the insects prevented the water clones from harming him, while Shino got up close with the man. Zabusa tried to trick him onto the water, only to discover that Shino had thought of that problem and taken to the sky on his hive. It was one of Naruto's favorite tricks. They had escaped the Anbu more than once by riding on Shino's hive. It wasn't exactly their fault that people rarely looked up. Shino sent wave after wave of insects. Zabusa was unhappy to learn that the boy was easily leeching his chakra, and redirecting it to his teacher. Kurenai started to push Zabusa back. Right as the man was about to launch a counter-attack, she appeared. Her timing was as horrible as ever. Anko grinned when she saw her favorite Aburame helping her roommate out. It was simple enough why she liked Shino and by extension Naruto. Shino liked snakes as much as she did, and could streetly care less that she was the abandoned apprentice of the traitor Orochimaru. Well, that and he put up with her quirks. To be fair, she was also one of the rare people who had seen his eyes. And he was only the Aburame heir because Shibi had adopted him and no one knew about it. She wasn't going to betray that trust. With the addition of Anko, Zabusa was definitely in a fix. With absolutely no warning at all, Chus and Bon suddenly lodged themselves in Zabusa's neck. Anko wasn't impressed by the little act in the least. Thanks for the assistance. I have been tracking him for some time, said a young voice. According to Shino's hive, the person before them was female. Knock off the act Gaki. If you're planning on killing someone, you don't go for the neck, Anko said. The figure leaned down to pick up Zabusa. And they didn't move. It was a stalemate at the moment anyway. Kurenai needed to heal and Zabusa was in no condition to bother them for a bit. Besides, if they allowed him to live now, Gato wouldn't bother hiring someone who could be more troublesome later. Anko helped Kurenai to the bed, while the others watched Tazuna. We should be able to take it easy for a few days. The nerves that Brat hit put people in a death-like state, and those aren't easy to recover from, said Anko. Kurenai was sound asleep. That was a girl who attacked him. Apprentice, suggested Shino. Anko looked at him. How the hell do you know that was a girl? My hive reacts differently to depending on gender, said Shino blandly. Anyway, I seriously doubt we'll have to deal with the girl until Zabusa recovers. In the meantime, I'm going to get you brats up to date on elemental chakra, said Anko. Hinata happened to share a similar preference to Anko, which meant she would have Anko all to herself. Luckily for her, she was used to Anko's antics. Plus Anko was already aware of Hinata's confidence problem, since the girl often crashed at Kurenai's house. Shino had a few wind scrolls. He had brought with him from the clan library. He had only been expecting bandits, which often scattered unless they were being led by a ninja. He had hoped that he could help Naruto learn a few wind tricks. They had moved past water walking ages ago. It was the only reason they had put up with catching Tora 3 times in a single week. Naruto, catch. Shino tossed one of the higher-classed ninjutsu scrolls he had found to his friend. Naruto fumbled a bit, but didn't drop it. Where did you get that gaki? Asked Anko. I borrowed a few elemental scrolls before I left. I brought a few for Hinata-chan as well, said Shino. Hinata caught hers with a bit more ease than Naruto had. Expecting a break, asked Kurenai. The mission was only for bandits. I wasn't planning on Junin and Chunin level shinobi from Mist, said Shino blandly. Fair point. Naruto, why don't you work on that wind scroll while I help Shino with his fire power? Hi, Kurenai-sensei. Naruto loved Kurenai. She only taught him new jutsu when he asked, but she never glared at him. She even took time to explain to him whenever he was confused. The fact that Shino also liked her made her his favorite Junin. Kurenai was a bit of a pyro, which was probably why she even dared to share a house with Anko Midarashi. Shino also shared her love of burning things. He once accidentally set the Uchiha compound on fire when he was 8. Itachi Uchiha, the supposed traitor of the clan, it was one rumor he didn't believe in the least, had been the one to find out that it was Shino who did it. Shino had more or less struck up a friendship with the boy, who was rather startled to learn that Shino wasn't as boring as his clan. Well, that and Shino was more than happy to share a few scrolls in exchange for borrowing some from Itachi. Scrolls Shino now owned, since he didn't want the elders to learn he had been friends with the rogue Uchiha. Itachi had been considerate enough to leave the scrolls he had borrowed outside Shino's window, so no one was aware they had gone missing. Shino put his hands into the seals without blinking. He had been intrigued by the dragonfire technique he had heard about before. Itachi went rogue, but had never had the time to properly try it out. It was a strictly Uchiha clan trick. Kurenai stared when the immense dragon of flame appeared before her. That was clearly a Yoni N-level technique. So where the hell did Shino get enough chakra to pull it off? Sensei, asked Shino. Shino, how is it that you have enough chakra to produce a full dragon? She asked. I have no idea. Perhaps I still have some of Zabusa's chakra left over. That would make a little bit of sense, but she could sense it wasn't the full story. Shino was a bundle of mysteries wrapped in a lock where the key was a puzzle. He was the only Aburame alive who could use fire and lightning type jutsu, which was generally shunned because they killed insects in large quantities. He was more social, N.D. wasn't shunned by a majority of the village, except for when he was pranking people Naruto Uzumaki. And then there were his eyes. Shino was the only person in Konoha with emerald green eyes. No one knew who his birth parents were, or why someone had left him on the Aburame doorstep nearly 12 years ago. He didn't admit the fact that he was adopted to just anyone, unless he trusted them completely. Which begged the question, who was Shino Aburame? Naruto was passed out on the ground, the scroll Shino had given him pinned beneath his body. He was so tired that he didn't register the perso. near him until a gentle hand shook him awake. He woke up with a start, expecting to see Hinata there. Instead it was a girl who could rival Hinata in the looks department. She had warm brown eyes and light raven black hair. He could sense the faint pulse of chakra beneath her skin, which meant she had to be Zabusa's mysterious apprentice. Naruto kept his demeanor open, keeping the fact that he knew who she was to himself. He even helped her pick medicinal herbs to heal her master. "See you later, Haku-chan. Tell Zabusa we'll be waiting for him," said Naruto cheerfully. Haku stumbled slightly, caught off guard by that last remark. She paused, and looked at him. "You knew." Chakra hum under the skin. "Hard not to notice, particularly since I'm friends with someone with bugs under theirs," said Naruto, never dropping his friendly stance. "Bugs?" she asked. She didn't really mind them that much, but she found them somewhat annoying at times. "Tall, dark hair and wears sunglasses even when indoors," he clarified. "The one who used fireflies to zap Master Zabusa?" she asked. Naruto nodded. "Interesting trick. I wish we weren't on opposite sides. Never know. Maybe Gato will do Someth. Phenomenally stupid and you can join us on the walk home." "We don't have a home. Like I said, things change. See you later Haku-chan," said Naruto. Haku walked away, wondering about the oddity that was Naruto Uzumaki. Chapter 4. Anko stared at Naruto. He had run into Zabusa's apprentice, and didn't fight her. She hit him on the head lightly. She was one of the few that Shino allowed to hit Naruto. Mostly because she only did it when he was being a true idiot. "Why didn't you attack her?" she demanded. 1. I had just woken up. 2. My chakra was really sluggish. 3. It was a chance to display my knowledge of medicinal plants without someone glaring at me, said Naruto. Naruto had a small greenhouse in the apartment next to his. Since no one wanted to live next to him, Shino Kanba inked his father to help Naruto buy the apartment next door and turn it into a greenhouse. In exchange Naruto grew medicinal herbs for the Aburame clan. The only downside was that the hospital refused to buy them, even if they were more effective than the ones grown in the official greenhouses. However, that didn't stop Choji's mother from buying the fruits Naruto grew. So long as she didn't know who grew the plants, she would buy them in bulk. Naruto was almost finished with his wind trick. It was a variation on the bug cloud Shino sometimes used to get above ground. It called up strong wind currents to support his weight, but the trick was getting the wind to stay still long enough for him to fly. Eventually, he grew frustrated enough to overpower the jutsu, and found that he had made a solid disc of pure wind. Shino paused in his training to stare. Naruto was levitating a good 10 feet off the ground on a semi-corporeal disc of pure air. Finally figured it out, he asked. Had to overpower it. Ah. Shino's attention was quickly brought back to the dragon he had summoned that was roughly the size of a medium-sized dog. It had taken advantage of his distraction to try and run rampant. Hinata beat him to the flames, as she summoned up a dragon of water. The hiss of the fire could be heard for quite some time. "Well done Hinata, I think you have that one down," said Anko cheerfully. "Arigato Anko-san," said Hinata. It was something of a miracle. A few days of training exclusively with Anko had managed to do what Shino had unsuccessfully attempted over the past 2 months. She had gotten rid of the stutter. Now if only she could get rid of that twitch. Kurenai looked at Shino with amusement. She saw Naruto and gave him a thumbs up. Now that he knew how to create the disc, he had to work on his control. Naruto stayed up in the air for a good 2 hours before the distraction Anko caused made him fall flat on his ass. If Zabusa didn't show up tomorrow, then Anko was going to use Naruto as target practice so he could get used to flying during a combat situation. Naruto was sound asleep when Kurenai took the rest for their guard duty. Anko took night shift to prevent anyone from sabotaging the bridge during the night. When he woke up, it was to the sounds of combat. Inari, the rather rude and whiny grandson of Tazuna, was in trouble. Naruto got rid of the bandits. Once he was awake enough to realize what was going on, he unwittingly managed to get the brat to grow up a little in the process. Naruto was quick to head to the bridge, where he heard the sounds of fighting. Anko and Kurenai were giving Zabusa hell while Shino was distracting the apprentice. Hinata had been drafted into protecting the client, since she had learned how to surround him in a ball of chakra. Naruto burst into the weird ice mirror thing that Shino was trapped in, getting a whack upside the head courtesy of Shino. Naruto, did it ever occur to you that maybe there was a reason why I haven't escaped the ice mirrors? Naruto brightened. Then his face fell. He could see where Shino was going with this. Oops. Shino removed his hand. Naruto could learn, if given the proper teaching. It's too late now. You can provide a barrier while I get the dragon to come out, Shino said tiredly. His chakra was running rather low, as his bugs couldn't follow the shinobi into the mirrors. Something else was coiled up inside him, waiting to be unleashed. But he had no idea what it was. Naruto created a shield, using his new wind disc to keep the Senbon from hitting them. Shino was almost ready to unleash his dragon, when the secondary power erupted with no warning. Flames stronger than any he had ever produced before flew from outside the shield, actually melting the ice. The girl fell flat on the bridge, temporarily stunned. Shino didn't waste his time, completely covering her in the chakra-eating insects. He left just enough for her to breath, but she wouldn't be using her Kekkei Genkai anytime soon. Naruto was quick to help Hinata, since Shino told him to let their teacher fight her own battles. Shino was tired, but he could still fight. Even so, he was in no mood to battle anyone else at the moment. He went to the girl, who was starting to wake up. She had suffered a nasty blow to the head when she crashed. "How did you?" she asked. "I haven't the foggiest." "How's your head?" he asked pleasantly. "Aren't you supposed to kill me? Our only orders were to protect the bridge builder. Besides, men like Gato aren't very good at keeping their word," he said bluntly. His case was proven when, 15 minutes later, Gato arrived with a large army of bandits. He planned to kill the ninja and Tazuna. Too bad Zabuza had other plans. Enko cheerfully tossed him a kunai, which he used to kill Gato. Haku, who would have joined him in a heartbeat if she hadn't lost so much strength, watched in mute silence as Zabuza killed the man. The injuries he received from the run into the mass of bandits were fatal. Even Hinata would have trouble treating them. Only a professional medic nin could have healed him at that point, which was why everyone was shocked when after Shino helped Haku to her master. A bright light hit the man. When they could see again, Zabuza was healed, though his chakra was so depleted it would take him some time to be able to use his techniques again. Shino, on the other hand, finally succumbed to chakra exhaustion. Shino opened his eyes, and found himself back at Tazuna's house. Naruto and Hinata were rather worried, and were thrilled to see him awake. "How long have I been out?" he asked tiredly. "Long enough for me to clear these two," said Enko cheerfully. Shino stared. Zabuza and Haku were in Tazuna's kitchen, drinking tea. Abusa was looking better than he had before he passed out, and Haku was quietly reading a scroll that Hinata had brought with her. They seemed rather amused that he was finally awake. A quick look at the calendar revealed he had been out for nearly 2 days. "I thought the Aburame clan died if they used too much chakra," asked Zabuza. "Haku-chan killed a good third of my hive, otherwise I might have," admitted Shino. Several of his hive had died from the temperature drop. They weren't suited to freezing cold. This coming from the kid who holds 3 times the normal amount of insects, said Naruto grinning. The two mist nin stared at him. "I am rather unusual in my clan," said Shino bluntly. Shino blinked, and realized something was off. Then he realized. "Where are my sunglasses?" he asked. Naruto handed them over. After he had cleaned them, he had wondered when Shino would ask that. "I wasn't aware Konoha had so many people with jewel-colored eyes," said Zabuza. "They don't. This team has the few people who do," said Shino bluntly. He really didn't like revealing his emerald green eyes to strangers, even if very few ever saw an Aburame without the traditional sunglasses and cloak. A few days later, the bridge was finally finished, and they were ready to leave with 2 extra. Shino was rather amused to hear that. The name was the Great Naruto Bridge. Hinata, on the other hand, was rather amused at the fact that Shino was oblivious to Haku's stares. Once she realized that yes, Haku suffered a similar problem when it came to admitting her crush, they had struck up a fast friendship. Both Naruto and Shino were unaware that they had somehow gained stalkers of the female variety. Kurenai and Anko thought it was hilarious. As did Zabusa, when Kurenai happened to point it out to the man. Sasuke, Aburame, are you aware you have a fangirl? He asked bored. Shino turned, but he saw no one there. However, his bugs weren't reacting, which meant it was someone familiar. Who? I don't know who she is. But she's been following you for the past 3 blocks, said Sasuke. He was hyper-aware of his surroundings in Konoha. He had to be, with his large fan base going to practically any lengths to date molest him. Outside of Konoha, he let his guard down. Can you describe her? Long black hair and brown eyes. That's all I could see, said Sasuke. Shino blinked, and realized that description fit the newest Chunin of the village. Zabusa had headed back to the Mist Village, once he heard about the new Mizuki. Since it was unlikely his apprentice would ever find peace in her home village, she had reluctantly stayed behind. She was currently apprenticed to Anko, who was teaching her more ways to inflict damage with her Senbon. Zabusa had been a fair teacher. Haku had almost immediately been given the rank of Chunin, after passing a relatively mild test by Iruka. Ever since then she had been taking on some of the more interesting C-rank missions. She had also been banned from capturing Tora after the cat was brought back paralyzed for 4 hours. It had scratched her rather deeply, and she had used one of her Senbon in retaliation. It survived, but she was never allowed near it again. The only complaint Shino had was that he had the strangest tendency to run into her at odd moments. If he didn't know any better, he would swear the girl was taking lessons from Hinata in stalking people. She was. Have you heard about the Chunin exams? Asked Shino. Where are they being held this year? Konoha. Kakashi hasn't said anything, but after that IGHT Mare mission in Swamp Country I wouldn't be surprised. What happened? The lazy bastard allowed Haruno to be hurt to prove a point. If our guide hadn't had the anti-venom on hand, she would have died. Should I send my lightning bugs after him? Send your fire bugs. I'll burn his masks then, said Shino. Sasuke grinned. They had unsuccessfully tried to see under the mask before, but Kakashi always had another one on him. All right brats, you 3 have been selected to go through the Chunin exams, announced Anko. Shino looked at Naruto, and held out his hand. Naruto grumbled, but handed over 100 ryo. Told you, he said simply. Yeah, grumbled Naruto. Next up, to get Hinata to admit her crush on Naruto. Once Shibi learned his son was going to be in the upcoming Chunin exams, he discreetly began laying bets that Shino would make it to the finals. Shibi had learned early on that if his son was participating in anything, he tended to come out on top. Shino was at the gates when he saw them arrive. His father had heard rumors that the Casecage's children would be participating this year, and had shown Shino what they looked like. Tamari, the oldest and only girl. Kankuro, the middle child and puppet user. And then there was Gaara, the youngest and most feared. Why that was, Shino had no idea, but he intended to find out. So he discreetly followed them, knowing full well Haku was always nearby. Once Sasuke had pointed it out to him, he realized she suffered from the same problem Hinata had around Naruto. He was just polite in ignoring that fact, though. He usually struck up a conversation with the girl. It was more than Naruto ever did outside of training. Because he was following the Sand 3, he was there to witness Kankuro start a fight with the Third's grandson Konohamaru. Shino was quick to stop the punch. It's considered rude to start a fight in another village, and you must be particularly dense to try and harm the Hokage's grandson, said Shino calmly. Kankuro went to bring out his puppet, until Shino brought out his rather small but still rather effective clan of termites. Kankuro blanched, and backed off. It didn't hurt that He-boy's boxers were abruptly turning to ice. I think he's learned his lesson, Haku-chan, said Shino. Are you sure? He looks even more dense than Naruto when it comes to girls. No offense Fox boy, said Haku. None taken Ice Queen, said Naruto with a grin. Once it was clear that Haku was here to stay, Naruto took it upon himself to befriend the girl. As a result, the 2 often shared light-hearted insults. Naruto would call her Ice Queen and she called him Fox boy. Their relationship was almost like a brother and sister. Shino's attention was quickly drawn to the silent and rather stoic redhead. Is this yours? He asked, gesturing to Kankuro. Unfortunately, I can tolerate my sister, but I fear he is a lost cause, replied Gaara in the same bland tone. I would ask if you are new here. But I believe the sand headband merely confirms that. Would you like to know where the best place to eat is? Asked Shino. Naruto picked up at that, and grinned even more. Shino had recently stolen the wallets of several Anbu. He would give them to Anko later once he had used up their cash so he could afford to take Naruto to Ichiraku's. Gaara looked interested at the idea of someone offering to buy them lunch, so he accepted. His older siblings had little choice but to follow his lead. As they walked, Shino held out his hand. Shino Aburame. Subaku no Gaara, said the redhead, taking the hand. When Shino actually shook it without flinching, Gaara took it as a good sign. Very few people were willing to associate with him, especially if they knew about his tanuki problem. By the time they reached the stand, Gaara was actually comfortable talking with Shino. The boy was silent, yes, but he made up for his lack of speech with his observation skills. When he offered to turn Konkuro's puppets into termite-ridden pieces of wood, he realized he had actually made a friend in the boy. Later that night, Gaara never slept. He couldn't sleep unless he wanted the raccoon inside him to destroy everything. So when the boy he had unexpectedly befriended appeared beside him with the loudmouth blonde, he brought up his defense. Relax, I would no more attack you than I would Naruto. Unless he does something spectacularly stupid. Quote, Oi, why are you here? To talk. I know of your problem, Gaara of the desert, and you are not as alone as you might believe. Gaara stared at him in disbelief. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. And I bear the nine-tailed fox, said Naruto, holding out his hand. Sabaku no Gaara. I bear the one-tailed tanuki known as Shukaku. And with that, Gaara found himself with something he had never hoped to have. Actual friends who wouldn't run away screaming. Chapter 5. Shino was having a bad day. It had started off with his wind jutsu blowing up in his face. Shino had decent control in his fire attributes, excellent control in lightning, and piss-poor control over wind. It was a miracle he even had wind attribute with his crappy control. He sighed. He had a Ling wind jutsu would only backfire until he learned how to control the other two first. Naruto bounded up to him, grinning like a fox. What did you do this time? He asked tiredly. I got Gaara to use the sexy jutsu on his brother. I've never seen someone turn that color before. This coming from the only male brave enough to even think of using such a trick in front of girls like Sakura Haruno. Naruto beamed at the compliment. Then an idea occurred to him, one that amused him greatly. Hey Shino, I wonder what you would look like as a no, he said flatly. Come on Shino, just one try. Shino had a feeling he could probably pull it off. The only issue was what Haku or Hinata would do to him if they ever found out. He didn't want to be sent back to the Aburame compound in a box. Naruto, however, would not be dissuaded, and eventually he managed to blackmail Shino into it. Anko happened to be nearby when she heard the pleading, and when she learned exactly what Naruto was bugging Shino about, she helped him into it. For some reason she had an outfit in Shino's size, and stylish sunglasses so he wouldn't go blind from the abundance of light. Shino had reluctantly explained to the woman that the insects inside him made his eyes very photosensitive. It was the reason why almost every Aburame wore sunglasses even indoors. Fine, if it gets you off my case, he said annoyed. Shino had seen Naruto use the trick often enough that he placed his hands in the ram seal. He only prayed his mother never learned about this. She would kill him if Hinata or Haku didn't. Sexy jutsu. Where Shino had been now stood a very attractive green-eyed girl with long flowing hair and a very generous bust. Anko cheered appreciatively. Will you drop this now? He asked. It was really close to a whine. Hell no, you're going to stay like that for the rest of the day, said Anko quickly. Shino stared at her in horror. Think of it as undercover training, she said amused. At least she allowed him to put on the outfit and sunglasses. Shino left the training area resigned to the fact he was stuck looking like a girl for the rest of the day. He had no idea of the looks he had inspired in the male population. Since he was stuck as a girl, Shino took advantage to see what exactly the women's side of the hot springs looked like. It was there that he ran into the pervert sage Jiraiya. Jiraiya had been peeking on the women when he saw her. A rather well-built girl wearing stylish sunglasses even in the pool. That marked her as an Aburame. The other girls gave her a wide berth, sink. It was clear she was from the rather disturbing clan. Suddenly, her eyes met with his, and he could feel them narrowing in annoyance. It was then that Jiraiya realized how doomed he was, as the largest hive he had ever seen in his life swarmed at him. What was really startling was the fact that the fireflies seemed to spark with actual lightning. When the girls realized that they had been spied upon, they were quick to chase him out of the hot springs. Jiraiya was bruised, cranky, and felt like a pin cushion. So when he saw the cause of his current predicament, he was understandably annoyed. "You deserved everything you got. Pervert," she said calmly. "I'm not a pervert, I'm a super pervert," he declared, without his kabuki pose. "Who are you anyway?" "I am Jiraiya, the Toad Sage," he declared. "And I am someone who regularly substitutes your trashy books with hardcore yaoi," she said flatly. He looked rather horrified at the thought. "You should hear the screams the Hokage lets off when he realizes I switch them," she continued amused. Jiraiya took a closer look at the Aburame. Something seemed off about her. Then he realized what it was. "Why are you under a henge?" "I have an ongoing bet with my teammate and the crazy snake bitch of the T and First Corps. I have to stay like this for an entire day," she replied annoyed. Shino had made it very clear he wouldn't stay like this for nothing. If he managed to stay a girl for an entire day and not get caught by anyone who knew him well, then they owed him a big favor of 50,000 ryo. "You know Anko. She happens to be my sensei's roommate," Shino replied dryly. Shino's sixth sense went off, and he vanished before Haku got a good look at him. For the rest of the day, Shino was playing a game of hide and seek with Haku. Gaara, when informed of his bet, found the whole situation rather amusing. Alas, the rather silent redhead was on Haku's side, as he kept giving the girl directions. When day turned to night, Shino thought his problem was over, until Anko informed him with some glee that he had to remain like that until noon the next day. It was with great reluctance that he sent a message to his father about playing a training game with Anko, and being unable to return home. Shibi was quite curious as to what kind of training game it was. Shino refused to tell him. Shino arrived in Area 44, eager to end this ridiculous bet. Just in case Anko tried to get out of her end, he had the giant snakes running interference from anyone other than Naruto and Anko. He wouldn't put it past the crazed woman T.O. pull a fast one and get out of the bet. It was a good thing too, because Anko tried to get Kurenai and Hinata to come with her. Upon seeing the snakes ready to eat them, they backed off rather quickly. Naruto was already there, grinning evilly. How was it being a girl all day? Boring. Though I did get to act out my aggression on a pervert outside the hot springs. Anko finally arrived at that point, and gave him a look. What's this I hear about lightning bugs attacking a pervert in the hot springs? Shino glared at her. Like you should worry about that. Jiraiya is in town, he said annoyed. Anko stopped looking annoyed and suddenly became pissed. She hated the Sannin, with the exception of Tsunade. Jiraiya has dared to show his mug back here. She growled. I set my lightning bugs on him. I didn't know perverts could run that fast when chased by irate females. Anko laughed. So it was you who alerted the off-duty Anbu to his peeking. Well done. Though I do have to ask. I saw him through the fence. What better way to test my skills at acting than to use the girls' side of the hot springs? It's not like I could spy on them anyway, since they quickly figured out I was in Aburame. True, most people don't associate with your clan outside of a mission. Can I drop it now? He asked. Fine, I'll pay you next time I take an S class. Or I call in the favor first, grinned Shino. Where were you, Shino? Asked his mother. Anko made a bet with me, and I couldn't return without losing, he said. What sort of bet? Asked his father. I couldn't let anyone recognized me while under Naruto's favorite henge trick. The one that Naruto loves to use on guys, Shino replied. Shibi's eyebrows raised above his glasses. Shino was brave enough to use that jutsu. You didn't. I set my fireflies on a pervert in the women's bathhouse. What do you think? Shibi stared at his son. He dared to go in there. Jiraiya really shouldn't have been at the hot springs. You set your lightning bugs on Jiraiya. He couldn't see through my henge. Don't let your mother find out about you using that particular jutsu. Father, do I look that suicidal to you? Shino asked him, amused. Shibi laughed quietly, and had his son describe the women's bathhouse to him. Shino was in the scroll shop when he heard the oddest rumor. An old man was popping in and out of shinobi villages looking for someone. And he appeared in the most unconventional method available. He apparently didn't have a passport. From the way he was traveling, he would be in Konoha right before the Chunin exams started. Shino didn't like the sound of that one bit. Shino had already helped Naruto fill out his application, so the only thing left was to turn them in. It was Hinata who saw through the rather poorly done genjutsu. Wasn't that Izumo and Katetsu from the front gate? Asked Shino. I think so, said Hinata. Wonder why they were pranking the idiots. I wonder if they got permission to leave the front gate. I thought they were on permanent gate duty, said Shino. Once they entered the room, the killer intent was palpable. Shino spotted Gaara, and went up to the boy. Yo, escape your stalker? Asked Gaara amused. No thanks to you, said Shino dryly. Hey Gaara, said Naruto cheerfully. Gaara's attention was drawn to Sasuke, who had just entered. Then his attention went to a rather violent pink-haired girl by his side. Who is that? He asked. Shino looked at where he was staring, and winced. Damn, it's Haruno. You dislike the girl? Asked Gaara. She's rude, violent and has a tendency to screech at us. Dislike is a bit tame for how I felt about her. Tamari realized what was going on, and looked at him in disbelief. She never thought she would see the day her evil younger brother actually acted, well, like a normal 14-year-old. And then Kiba had to act like an idiot. And here I thought you were the most unpredictable loudmouth. Kiba seems to be trying for your title Naruto, said Shino amused. I can't have that, said Naruto annoyed. Fortunately for Shino's hearing, Ibiki arrived. He allowed his gaze to wander the hall, and recognized someone. Why was Haku there? Wasn't she already a Chunin? Everyone drew lots, and slowly Shino figured out the main point of this test. They were testing their spying skills. Haku must have been drafted by either mistake or chance. Either way he had his target. Shino caught Naruto's gaze, and nodded towards Haku. Naruto, after years of pranking people with Shino's help, had become somewhat adept at speaking without words with the boy. They had to spy on Haku's paper to get through this. Fortunately, Naruto was also somewhat adept at reading from Shino's bugs. Well, that and Shino had recently learned Ho-W to transmit messages with short electrical spurts using his fireflies. Luckily Naruto didn't mind the shock. 15 minutes into the exam, and Naruto was already sweating. It was a very good thing. Shino had taken time to teach him the Anbu Morse code, because otherwise he never would have managed to get any of these answers. Ibiki was giving them an odd look, but he couldn't do anything back. The only sign Naruto had that he was cheating was that his hair was standing up slightly more than usual. Apparently Naruto wasn't the only one who was picking up Shino's answers, because a few Genin who had relatives in the Anbu squad were also picking up on the Morse code. Shino had a bit of trouble keeping the code from creating a slight crack sound with each letter and number. Haku pretended to be oblivious to the tiny firefly in her hair, though she knew it was there. 30 minutes into the exam, and over half the teams had been kicked out. Things were steadily slowing down when, crack, everyone jumped, especially Shino. Ibiki shot him a look, but he had a suspicion that the sound wasn't from the lightning user. Shino was far too subtle and his instant appearing trick had got quieter over the few months he had been practicing it. But there was no mistaking that particular sound. Stay here, he barked to the applicants. There, near the hall, was a man who was definitely a civilian. No shinobi worth his salt would dress that colorfully. Even Guy, with his absolutely horrifying fashion sense, had enough sense not to mix puke green, neon orange, bright pink and that shade of purple. Let alone wear a bathrobe like that. The twinkle in his eyes was almost like the Hokage when informed of Naruto's pranks, but they were nowhere near as warm. Do you mind? We have an exam going on, said Ibiki angrily. I am looking for a boy about 13 with bright green eyes and a lightning scar above his right eye. I was informed that he might be found here. His accent is horrific. I don't know who you are talking about, but you're going to have to deal with the T and first core for that little appearing act of yours, said Ibiki annoyed. The old man tensed, but before he could do the rather loud disappearing trick, he was hit from behind with a pair of senbon. For once your timing isn't atrocious, said Ibiki amused. I thought the brat was making an escape attempt, Anko replied. His disappearing stunt has become much quieter, and he was busy helping the fox kid make it to the next round. Or flirting with the ice girl. Anko let out a bark of laughter. Shino was being subtle about his interest in Haku. At least he wasn't acting like, well, Kakashi or Jiraiya. I'll see you in the hall in 10 minutes. Who knows, maybe I'll scare some of those genin and turn this day around, grumbled Ibiki. Ask the brat to shock someone you don't like. He's made Kakashi paranoid about fireflies of late, smirked Anko. Ibiki perked up at that. Ibiki returned to find the genin sweating. Well, most of them. Those he felt would survive to the end were rather cool. The blonde loudmouth was no longer freaking out, and from the looks the other examiners were giving Bug Boy and Ice Queen. The two had decided to amuse themselves. He was going to guess that the two had flirted a bit while he was gone. Meh, that wasn't his problem. He made a show of looking at the clock, and inwardly smirked. It was time for the 10th question. Haku was waiting for Shino at the monument. While Ibiki had been dealing with whatever idiot used the same trick Shino sometimes used to get to team meetings on time, he only used it when Anko made it clear she wouldn't accept him being tardy like Kakashi. Shino had used the distraction to his advantage by subtly flirting with her. A quart of fireflies had settled across her paper, and spelled out a message. It took her a moment to figure out how to respond, but once she figured out a system, the two discussed things at length. Event. You ally Shino became brave enough to ask her out on a date, and to meet at the Hokage monument at 8, above the 4th Hokage relief. She had arrived wearing her nicer kimono, and Shino arrived with a new jacket and glasses. They spent the next 3 hours enjoying each other's company, ignoring the fact that Anko, Kurenai, Naruto and Shibi were all stalking them the entire time. Haku had rewarded Shino's bravery with a kiss, and then winked at their escorts. Shino was never more thankful for the wide collars of the Aburame coats, because it hid his blush rather effectively. Chapter 6. Woot. Happy birthday to me. Today I turned 24. Review PLZ. Dumbledore awoke in a rather odd position. All he could remember was the sharp pain of something small hitting him near the neck, before oblivion took him. But then his attention was brought to the rather attractive woman before him, and the fact that for some inexplicable reason he couldn't use his wandless magic. No tricks, old man. I had the brat. Drain whatever power you used to infiltrate the village. You won't be leaving here until you answer some questions, and that's if I like your answers, the woman purred. Had the old man known who he was facing he would have blanched. The woman before him was the much deadlier equivalent of Severus Snape, the only person who knew where he was at the moment. At least the general area anyway. For the next 8 hours, Dumbledore suffered the rather disturbing interrogation methods of Anko Mitarashi, the snake bitch. It had taken him 5 minutes to realize he was dealing with a Slytherin-like RSON rather than the Ravenclaw or Gryffindor he was hoping for. Anko was rather thorough, and to his horror he spilled exactly why he was in the village. Her eyes narrowed at the description, which was more than enough for him to learn he was finally in the right village. Petunia Dursley had been less than forthcoming about where she left the boy who lived, and her memories were less than reliable. He considered himself lucky to have recognized the elemental countries in the first place. Finally, the woman left and he tried to reach for his magic. He was rather proud to be able to apparate without his wand, which had been confiscated while he was out cold. Finding out that he barely had enough magic in him to rate above Squib was a rather nasty surprise. Somehow they had drained nearly all of it, though he had no idea how. So what's the verdict? Asked Ibiki. He apparently came here to kidnap the Aburame heir, though I seriously doubt he knows what Shino looks like. All he had was a vague description of a boy about 13 with emerald green eyes and a scar above the right eye. What makes you assume he's after Shino? Asked Inoichi. Shino Aburame is the only person in the village with emerald green eyes. The scar is easy enough to overlook, but eyes like those get noticed fairly quick, answered Anko. Unless you're an Aburame, In which case they would be behind glasses at all times, said Ibiki. Nodding his head. Then there's that thunder trick he used to get in. Only the brat has ever used that until now. True. Why don't we send him to the Hokage so we can get rid of him sooner? Asked Ibiki. Best have the brat's bugs on him. Something tells me this guy is used to using whatever that weird power was to get his way. Shino had a headache. It wasn't because Naruto was getting on his nerves. Or because someone had been over loud. It was because whatever he had drained from the old man had literally stirred up his nest inside his body. It was like his insects were on steroids or something. The last time he had this problem, he had learned about the odd power he had inside him. It had taken 3 weeks of intense training to get the hive back to normal. And even then he was still a human vibrator for an entire week. Guys, we need to find someone insanely tough to beat within the next hour or my hive is going to give us away, Shino said suddenly. The other two looked at him. Why? Because my hive is so stirred up that they won't leave me alone unless they can work out this excess energy. You have no idea how much trouble they can cause when they are this hyped up. What kind of trouble? Asked Naruto, interested. Last time I didn't get rid of the excess. The small termite hive I had went ballistic and devoured 4 stores in a small section of the forest before finally dying off of overeating, Shino deadpanned. The two stopped and looked at him. It was easy enough to read the expression they had. It was a total, WTF, look. Yay, Dad refused to let me replace them when it was obvious I couldn't control them. Just out of curiosity, what kind of bugs do you have on hand at the moment? Asked Naruto slowly. Mostly butterflies, moths, and fireflies. And nearly 100 of those special healing bugs, but they're pretty dormant unless blood is present. Why butterflies? Asked Hinata. I like butterflies. Besides, tend to be less creeped out around me if I use them instead of the moths, deadpanned Shino. Hinata acknowledged his point. Girls were more likely to hang around if he used butterflies instead of the more creepy insects. Hey, didn't your dad ban you from keeping any of the larger insects here? Asked Naruto, changing the topic. Shino's look soured. Both of them did, even though it was pretty clear I could handle the chakra load. They said I wasn't allowed to keep any insects here because my body wouldn't be able to handle it. His teammates laughed, because it was obvious Shino was still sulking about that. Since it was clear Shino would be of little to no help without getting rid of his excess energy, they went in search of a stronger opponent. And found it in the one person they really should have avoided. To say Sasuke was surprised to see Shino and Naruto there to help him would be an understatement. Particularly since the pink banshee happened to be there too. To make things even more confusing was the fact that the large snake, which had previously been aiming to eat him whole, had suddenly stopped and was looking at Shino with speculative eyes. Orochimaru, the snake Sannin, was more interested in him than he was in Shino, which was odd considering Shino had definitely said something to that snake. He would have thought that the snake creep would jump at the chance to mark someone like Shino. So Enko wasn't kidding when she said you'd never bother with an Aburame host, said Shino amused. Sasuke looked at him. Apparently he can't stand bugs, and so ing about our bodies make it impossible for him to use us as hosts, clarified Shino. Lucky bastard. Shino smirked behind his collar. More like he's an unlucky bastard. My insects have been riled up, and the only way to calm them down is to go all out. And with that statement, Sasuke finally noted the fact that Shino wasn't even on a branch. He was literally flying on a cloud of what appeared to be black emperor butterflies. Orochimaru was more concerned about the large wave of moths that were coming at him intent on devouring his clothes. He didn't even notice the other wave of flying insects coming at him. He dodged, and landed on a tree, which abruptly broke in half upon landing. Further investigation by Sasuke revealed the largest termite hive he had ever seen in his life, not counting that odd incident where the store he was in suddenly collapsed after he left it. Imagine my surprise when I found that my original termite hive that had gone ballistic a few years ago had survived, and was thriving here. Said Shino amused. Orochimaru wasn't as amused. He actually hissed at him, though it was more human than snake-like. Unlike Shino, Orochimaru didn't have the ability to use snake speak. And he didn't immediately command respect from the snake summons. He only believed he did. Which was probably the reason why what happened next shocked the traitor to his core. Shin-O's hands flew into a familiar series of seals, and he bit his thumb to complete the contract. Summoning Jutsu. Snake. From beneath Shino came the largest snake Sasuke had ever seen. Though the look on Orochimaru's face was priceless. Because Shino had not only turned his own summon beast against him, he had brought out the boss snake himself. So, you finally decided to use that contract she gave you. It's about time, brat, hissed Manda, amused. I had yet to meet someone who was worthy of a fight with you, Manda-sama, said Shino. True. Manda shot out at Orochimaru, who was still in a bit of shock. Where did you get that contract? He demanded. Enko introduced me to Manda-sama when I was 8. He took a liking to me, as if that explained everything. Which, in a strange sense, it did. Enko had been rather thrilled that the only person in the village who was considered creepier than her had the requirements to summon snakes. Shino just didn't like using it that much because he was a well-known bug user. And snakes were more of Enko's thing than his. Plus the drain alone would kill him unless half his bugs were dead. With the arrival of Manda, the fight was decidedly one-sided. Shino, however, did not want Enko to run into Orochimaru just yet. With a wave of his hand, he threw a branch at Orochimaru, who suddenly vanished halfway to wave. Yes, Shino made a port key without a clear destination. He can only do this with places he has been at least once. Since Sasuke, Kiba and Sakura were worn out, Shino had the brilliant idea to use up that excess energy which, unfortunately, had yet to go away despite the fight with a Sannin by healing their fellow shinobi. Sakura originally didn't want the rather disgusting-looking bugs on her, but when she saw Sasuke allowing them to crawl over his wounds, she reluctantly relented. She was very shocked to find that her chakra was replenishing at a very fast rate. These bugs promote chakra growth, but right now I'm handling whatever the hell I took from the old man who interrupted the first exam. For some reason it wouldn't translate into normal chakra, said Shino. Who was that old guy? Asked Sasuke. If these bugs were so useful, then why didn't more of the Aburame clan use them? I don't know, and frankly I don't care. All I know is that whatever the hell he has caused my hive to become hyped up. I hate it when that happens. Why haven't I heard about these bugs before? Asked Sasuke. They take up at least 4 times the amount of chakra in a hive. Plus they're strictly an Aburame clan insect. Saint of us don't even use them because they eat so much. I'm the only person in the clan who maintains more than 10 in my hive. I have to ask, why butterflies? Shino looked amused. How Sasuke could tell, he had no idea. I like butterflies, so sue me. Besides, people are less likely to run screaming from them than they are from that termite hive. Why didn't the branch beneath us collapse like that snake creep? Asked Kiba, honestly confused. Shino looked at him, his amusement even stronger. Naruto had finished bandaging the stab wound Sasuke had given himself. He could take it off in a day or two. Hinata was busy helping Sakura get over her shaking. The termites that devoured that branch used to belong to my hive. One day they went ballistic on me, and devoured 4 stores and a good portion of the forest before dying. I had assumed most had died off, but apparently the surviving portion went here. Wait, those were your termites that day. That store nearly collapsed on me, said Sasuke annoyed. I dislike it when they get this worked up. I had no part in whatever caused them to destroy that store, Shino replied flatly. His dad told him he wasn't allowed to have any more till he could find a way to prevent it from happening again, said Naruto with amusement clear on his face. He won't have a choice now. It's against our clan rules to leave any portion of your hive unchecked. Particularly if they happen to be destructive like termites, said Shino. Sakura shivered. Bug Boy was going to become creepier. Great. By the way, which scroll did you guys get? Heaven. Why? Asked Sasuke with suspicion. Then you won't need this, said Shino. In his hands was the scroll he had nicked from the snake Sannin. How he got that when the man had swallowed it 5 minutes after challenging Sasuke's team. He didn't want to know. Which one did you guys get? Asked Kiba. Earth. How about in exchange for saving you from that snake creep, we keep this scroll? Said Shino casually. Done, said Sasuke. Gaara. Aburame, Uzumaki, said Gaara. He was somewhat amused. Have fun, asked Shino. I killed people who annoyed me, what do you think? He replied blandly. Village affiliation, asked Shino. Rain, I can live with that. Depressing bastards, said Shino cheerfully. How was your foray into the forest? Asked Gaara. Boring, until I kicked a Sannin out of the village. The larger predators know to avoid us by scent, and the snake usually hide us. After a prank, said Shino amused. Gaara's raised eyebrow spoke volumes. Apparently the snake Sannin was in the forest posing as a Genin. He was targeting the last Uchiha when I showed up. My hive was a bit hyped up, so I attacked. His expression at my summon beast was particularly satisfying. Gaara, for his part, actually squirmed a bit when Shino casually mentioned that particular Sannin. Shino stared, and said, anything I should know about? Yes, but you can't tell me because it would possibly damage your chances of a real friend. He asked. Yes, considering I had to deal with Orochimaru of all people, and from what Anko has said about her former mentor, I'm guessing it has something to do with destroying Konoha. He said blandly. Gaara said nothing, but his eyes said volumes. And I assume you are Mr. Fuzzy has something to do with it. Shino continued. Gaara smiled at the nickname Shino gave his Tanuki problem. To be fair, Shino also called Naruto's fox spirit Mr. Cuddles. The Kyuubi absolutely hated that nickname. Possibly, you would think a Sannin would come up with something more original. Said Shino dryly. True. On the plus side, I found out that some of my hive had survived a particularly embarrassing incident, said Shino in a good mood. Do tell, said Gaara. About 4 years ago, my termite hive went absolutely nuts without warning, and devoured 4 stores and a good portion of the forest. I still have no idea why, said Shino blankly. Gaara stared at him. Devoured. Like I said, they went nuts. I had assumed they had all died from overeating, but I recently found them in the forest. Fortunately I was able to take control of them before anyone found out, said Shino amused. Why is that so amusing? Asked Gaara. Because my parents and clan absolutely forbade me from having another hive until I could prevent them from destroying stores like before, said Shino. Gaara finally got the joke. By finding his previous hive, his clan would have no choice but to allow him to keep the insects. Now if only I could find a way to control this secondary power that got them so wound up in the first place. Meditation seems to help, but not much, complained Shino. Gaara was rather silent, but then again he wouldn't know how to help his friend anyway. Chapter 7. Thank you to everyone who wished me a happy birthday. As a present to you all, I am updated this FIC just for you. And don't worry folks, the chances of me giving the pink banshee AGIC is are likely as Orochimaru becoming straight and no longer chasing little boys. Not gonna happen. Smiley face. Shino was bored, and a bored Shino Aburame was a very, very bad thing, as the Anbu could relate. Which was why Iruka hit a shudder when Shino politely asked to weed out the competition before the second day was out. On one hand, they had already made it to the tower, but there weren't any less that said they had to remain in the tower once they retrieved the second scroll. They just had to be in the tower before the 5th day ended with their team. He couldn't help but feel he had Signy D the death certificate of any team outside of Konoha. Which he pretty much did, since Naruto was currently busy playing poker with Gaara, Hinata and Temari. Naruto never played against Shino, because he was the reigning poker champ among the Genin. Shino would return before the end of the 4th day, if he had any say in it. His bugs were humming under his skin, but they were finally over whatever had them so worked up. He wasn't going to drain whatever that was again until he could find a proper outlet for it. Since he was in a good mood, he went in search of the Sound Trio. They had annoyed him when they attacked a Konoha shinobi with absolutely no regard to the consequence. Plus the black-haired boy had been entirely too loud for him to ignore him. He found them in the one place he didn't expect. With Sasuke's team. Am I going to make a habit of this? Asked Shino blandly as his bugs drained the Sound Trio's chakra. I thought you'd be at the tower by now, said Sasuke in surprise. My team is in the tower. But I got bored and Iruka said there wasn't anything in the rules about getting rid of the competition early, said Shino. He does realize he just signed the death sentence for anyone outside of the leaf. Doesn't he? His muttering lead to something of that effect, yes. While they chatted, the Sound Three found themselves on the wrong end of aboard Shino. The boy who had nailed Kabuto earlier found his weapon effectively plugged up with flies and termites. Shino was culling the weaker ones, while the girl was essentially in a genjutsu caused by the dust NKO had given Shino when she learned of his butterfly hive. The lone male that was unaffected was currently trying to attack Shino, but his teleport trick was making that difficult at best. To his credit, Shino had finally gotten the hang of teleporting without the loud crack sound. Finally, Shino decided to end his little game by taking out the girl. If they were out one team member, then they couldn't advance to the next round. Sasuke, I'll leave their Earth Scroll to you. Have fun playing with them, said Shino cheerfully as his bug clone took the unconscious female. The bandaged boy summed up their situation with a single word. Fuck. Kiniko Tsuchi quickly realized how doomed she was. Not only had she been captured by a single genin, but she was effectively cut off from her team. To make matters worse, it was obvious the boy was at least a student of Orochimaru's former apprentice, which only spelled bad things for her. On the bright side, she wouldn't have to listen to Zaku's whining again. Now normally I would drain your chakra and leave you to die, but since I'm not really in the mood for that, I've decided to let Haku have some fun instead. Haku-chan, said the boy casually. She's the one you want me to convert? Asked a decidedly feminine voice. She belongs to Orochimaru, who, sad to say, is more messed up than Zabuza ever could be. Ah, I see your point. Shall we get to work then? Just as long as I get back to the tower a day before the exam ends, said the boy bluntly. My dear Shino, whatever makes you think I would dare allow you to fail because of that? Purred Haku. That tone of voice sure as hell isn't helping, he said flatly. Haku laughed, and Kiniko decided she rather liked the chime of it, despite how screwed she was. The boy's voice wasn't that bad either. Rather melodic as it was calm. Then they turned their attention to her, and she winced. This would not end well. Shino reappeared at the tower almost at midnight of the fourth day. Still within his deadline, but even he knew he was cutting it close. Kintsuchi had been surprisingly easy to convert to the leaf, once they made it clear that unlike Orochimaru, they didn't make it a practice to harm their students to get them to do what they wanted. Though to be blunt, catching Tora almost every other day was a form of torture in itself. Once Haku ensured that Kin wouldn't try to double-cross them, apparently the other girl had been lacking in simple kindness and compassion for years. She took the girl with her to see the Hokage. As it was, Haku was going to deliver a report about Orochimaru's rather intense interest in the Uchiha heir, and the fact that Shino managed to get him far enough from the village to prevent the snake from marking Sasuke. Yo Shino, have fun. I may have converted an enemy into an ally, said Shino blankly. Haven't you done that already? Asked Hinata, nodding to Gaara and his team. Ah, but now I have a better idea of what he wanted to tell me but couldn't, answered Shino. So who did you get? Sound girl. Something tells me we're going to have a lot of fun when word gets out she's joined the dark side of the Konoha Genin, said Shino with restrained glee. Dark side of the Konoha Genin? Asked Hinata. Hinata, who is our secondary teacher? Anko. And what do Naruto and I do whenever we're really bored or in a very bad mood? Prank the Anbu or any available upper-level shinobi. And what is our team's other specialty? Stalking. I see your point. I will help whip Naruto into shape if you do one thing during this part of the exam, said Shino. What? Shino whispered it into her ear, and she turned bright red. Do you have any idea what my father would do if I did that? Especially in public, she complained. Had do you think I would do to him and the elders if they tried to retaliate because of who you happen to like? He asked in return. Hinata thought about that for a moment. With the discovery of the termite hive, it was extremely likely Shino would bring the Hyuga compound crashing down on their ears. It was well known that after the incident when he was 8, that he had been banned from having them in his hive. So they would be hard-pressed to blame him. Fine, but once I nab him we are so double dating, said Hinata firmly. Deal. Though from the looks that Sound Girl was giving me and Haku, I have a sneaking suspicion it would be a triple date, said Shino dryly. Hinata grinned at him, and he was very thankful that the collar covered his blush. Right, since it isn't well known she's alive, why not help me spread a few false rumors about her being killed by one of the tigers? It's not like anyone would dare try and confirm it, said Shino. Hinata smirked, and they set to it. Kabuto seemed to be the only person who was upset by that news, though he barely managed to hide it. To be fair, it was hard to hide something like that from an Aburame, who prided themselves on being extremely hard to read in general. As a result, they tended to pick up on hidden emotions better than most. Shino, when he noted that reaction, became suspicious. Kineko had mentioned a traitor in the Leaf Village, and something told him he had found him. He wasn't really surprised to see Sasuke's group in the tower. After all, he had ensured they would make it to the next round, provided they avoided the tigers and snakes in the forest. Day 5. Shino was bored, but he stayed put. He didn't want to get kicked out because he went outside. Fortunately, Haku had arrived earlier bearing some scrolls to read, particularly one from the Hokage that looked like a regular training scroll on the outside. 2. Aburame Shino, thanks in part to your report, I am glad to inform you that Kinnick Osuchi has officially defected to the Leaf, and is currently taking up the last spare bedroom in Enko's house. Enko has already cleared her to stay. Also, there has been some developments concerning that secondary power you have. It will be discussed in length once this phase of the exam is over, as you'll have time to decide on what to do with that power. Shino blinked. So they had finally found information on that odd power. It was about time. Haku cheerfully gave him a peck on the cheek, as she whispered, I don't mind having someone else join in on our play time. Why'd I suddenly get the feeling that by the time I'm a Chunin I'll have created a powerful harem? He asked. Because you're that good, replied Haku. Point. Plus we're going to have fun if the Hyuga elders complain about Hinata's choice in boyfriends. Quote, you convinced her to make a move, more along the lines of assuring her that the Hyuga clan won't have squat to say about her choices. This have anything to do with that discovery you made earlier? Possibly, but don't ruin my fun. You get to take a picture of my parents' faces when I inform them of the matter. Haku was positively happy with that thought. Shino was planning on introducing her to his family as soon as this part of the exam was over. He had little doubt she would make a good impression on his parents. Plus the fact that she had a KKEI Genkai would really go over well with the clan heads. She was new blood after all. Shino was a bit annoyed to find out that he had to fight during this round. Kabuto's actions once he learned out the tournament only raised more flags about him being the traitor. If he was, well, Enko might find a pressing need to bring him into the T&I department. She already liked him well enough. Now, all he had to do was make it to the next round. He watched calmly as the weaker Genin were weeded out rather early. It appeared that mostly the rookie 9 would survive to reach the finale stage. As it was, his father had already assured him that any winnings made based on his advancement would be split 60-40. Shibi didn't mind sharing a small part of his winnings with his son, who was doing all the work. Finally, Shino's name was up. He was rather pleased to note that his opponent was the rather annoying Neji, a boy who had frowned rather deeply when Hinata had finally made her move on Naruto during her fight. Due to Naruto's encouraging shouts, she had already beaten her opponent, who happened to be Kankuro. Shino decided to make his point to the Hyuga now, rather than waiting. He teleported to the floor, and waited patiently for the match to start. I hope you do not think ill of me for defeating you. Fate has already determined the winner of this match, said Neji confidently. Neji needs some new lines. And I don't believe in fate, said Shino firmly. He didn't believe in destiny either. He was a firm believer of carving your own path. Thank you very much. If someone like Naruto, who was looked down upon by most of the village, could hook the Hyuga heir, then who was to say that he couldn't be Hokage as well? Neji got into the gentle fist stance, and Shino smirked behind his collar. He was going to have a great deal of fun with this one. Oh dear, Neji sure drew the short end of the Senbon, said Naruto from above. What makes you say that, Naruto? Asked Sasuke. Shino's got his I am going to humiliate someone in a very public and unpleasant way vibe going on. Neji is screwed, said Naruto sagely. I still don't know how you can read him, complained Sakura. Easy. We're best friends. Anyone who frequents his house learns to read the vibe they give off pretty quick, said Naruto amused. Actually he has a point. Shino is giving off an odd vibe at the moment, admitted Sasuke. Look, he's started playing with him, said Naruto. Naruto was right. It was very obvious to everyone that Shino was playing with Neji, who was acting like he was high as a kite. Something in the dust his butterfly hive was spreading around evidently caused Neji to see pretty colors. Hinata found it all rather hilarious, because she was having difficulty trying not to laugh. Eventually Shino grew tired of his toy, as he sent his mauves in to finish Neji off. Consume. By the time Neji came around, he was horrified to realize his, shortcomings, we exposed to the entire audience. Hinata at least took Naruto's cue to look away before she was exposed to the sight. Eep. Neji was rather quick to forfeit after that. Winner. Shino Aburame. Shino used his butterfly hive to fly him back up to his teammates, who were crowing about his prank. Hinata, I want you to spread the word to your clan that if I hear about them targeting you, I will. I'll perform a repeat of what I just did to Neji. Only I will make it in public, said Shino. Thank you Shino, she said, grateful. Friends protect each other, particularly when they are on the same team, said Shino calmly. Hinata beamed at him. Naruto, it seemed, had lucked out. His opponent was Kiba. Unfortunately for Kiba, Naruto had been introduced to certain powders and oils that reeked to high heaven courtesy of Anko. Powder and oils he would happily use on Kiba and Akamaru. Ow! Cried Kiba, his nose fighting him every time he got close to Naruto. Naruto had already plugged up his Ather's strong sense of smell by having Hinata use her gentle fist the minute he found out who his opponent was. Thankfully it was a temporary fix. Akamaru was downright whimpering from the smell. What could possibly cause such a reaction from the two? Somehow, someway, Anko had found a way to bottle up the smell of skunk. A smell that Naruto all too happily threw on his opponents, to their horror. Within minutes Naruto was declared the winner, and Kiba had to be carried off by a rather unhappy pair of medic nin. Finally, the pairings were decided. Shino vs Temari. Naruto vs Gaara. Hinata vs Ino. Sasuke vs Lee. How Ino had beaten Sakura was rather amusing. Even if she had an inner Sakura, the girl had no teammates to back her up. It was so depressing to learn that Sakura had admitted defeat. It didn't help that Hinata and Naruto were cheering Ino on, instead of them both. You wanted to see me, Hokage-sama? Asked Shino. Sitting on one of the chairs was the old man Anko had him drain of that odd power. The one that sent his hive into a frenzy. Ah, come on in Shino-kun. I was just telling Dumbledore-san what a bad idea it was to try and infiltrate a hidden village with the intent to kidnap one of their genin. Said the Hokage pleasantly. Seeing the old man wince, it wasn't hard to figure out that the Hokage was more than annoyed. And why was I summoned, Hokage-sama? Asked Shino, honestly curious. Behind him was Anko and Haku, both ready to take the old man out if he tried anything. Sarutobi nodded to Dumbledore, who launched into his tale of the boy who had gone missing 12 years ago. Apparently it looked bad that he had allowed the woman who was supposedly the boy's aunt to leave him on the doorstep in a hidden village, without even a by your leave. When Shino asked why he was so desperate to find one boy, who was probably either dead or living his life, Dumbledore explained about a prophecy, which is where Shino stopped him. Old man, you are barking up the wrong tree. It is extremely foolish to base an entire community's hopes on some convoluted prophecy, particularly when the chosen savior is picked at random. For all you know this, Voldemort, character chose the wrong child. Dumbledore shook his head. The prophecy was clear. Voldemort would attack people who had defied him 3 times and mark their child as his equal. A child born at the end of July. And how exactly would he mark this kid? Asked Anko, not amused. The child he went after has a lightning-shaped scar on his forehead, right above his right eye. He also has emerald green eyes from his mother, and messy raven black hair from his father. In all likelihood, the boy would be a natural prankster. Anko and Haku made a point not to look at Shino when he said emerald eyes. And why exactly did you wait all this time to go looking for him? Asked Shino rather annoyed. Dumbledore coughed nervously. The school I run doesn't allow children under 11 to join. He was supposed to be safely tucked away at his aunt's until that time, he said. Shino stared at him, then looked at the Hokage with suspicion. And what, exactly, does all this have to do with me? Because according to Dumbledore, that ability you use to teleport with such a loud noise is called apparition. Which means you, Shino Aburame, have magic. Shino couldn't help but feel his month had suddenly become pear-shaped. Chapter 8. Shino found himself wandering the village. Finding out that he was apparently a child of prophecy with a power called magic had been a lot to take in. Even if the old man had no idea that he was the missing boy who lived. He eventually ended up near the village gates. Because he happened to be there at that time, he was witness to the strangest sight. A man, wearing pure black robes, which wasn't really practical considering Fire Country was a somewhat tropical climate, and snow is only hinted at during winter, was at the gates. He looked like he would rather be anywhere else, but was forced to come to Konoha on business. Azumo and Katetsu were arguing over his papers, which were somewhat out of date. "Can I help you, sir?" asked Shino. Perhaps this old afford the distraction he needed to clear his head. "I was sent here to retrieve someone, but I don't have any current papers for this country," he answered in stiff, but passable Japanese. His accent was odd, but it wasn't that bad. "Who were you sent to retrieve?" asked Shino. The man looked cross about something as he replied, an old man with absolutely no fashion sense and the misguided belief that everything he does is for the greater good. On second thought, this might make my migraine worse, not better, thought Shino bitterly. Would this old man go by the name of Dumbledore? "'Cause he's in some hot water for entering the village and planning to kidnap one of the genin here," said Shino. The sour look darkened. "That's probably him. You'll have to wait while I get Anko then. Otherwise they won't let you in without a current passport," Shino informed him helpfully. The sour look softened, but not by much. Shino accepted that small victory. It was pretty obvious that he had only been sent because he could speak the language. Anko wasn't happy to have her dango time interrupted, though she at least accepted his reasoning. Having the second in command of the torture and interrogation unit escorting a stranger with out-of-date passports would keep him from causing trouble, like the old geezer who was currently under strict watch. Severus Snape, as it turned out, was a male version of the snarky Anko. He even shared her love of dango, which really shocked Shino. It didn't take long for the awkward silence to pull out the real reason Snape was there. He was dumb. Lador's backup plan if he didn't return before a certain date. Mostly because he was the only person who had ever been in the elemental countries before, if only for a vacation. For some odd reason, the man's familiar couldn't find him. Shino had a sneaking suspicion it was because he had drained all of Dumbledore's magic from the man, and it would take a while for him to recover. Which was true. Fox couldn't find anyone with magic levels as low as a squib unless introduced to their magical signature more than once. Eventually Anko loosened up, having already determined that Snape wasn't a danger to the village. He was just cranky from having to retrieve his boss, who should have known better in the first place. "Ah, Severus, how nice of you to finally show up," said Dumbledore with false cheer. Inside, however, he was more than annoyed it took him this long. "I told you before you left that coming here unannounced was a bad idea. Is it my fault you didn't listen to my advice?" He replied bluntly. He had in fact warned Dumbledore that going to a ninja village without the right paperwork was extremely stupid. Dumbledore foolishly had assumed he would be in and out of the elemental countries with his pawn in tow before it became an issue. Sadly, he never counted on their reflexes being many times greater than his. Or throwing him into their interrogation division with someone as crazy as Anko on a sugar high. Though to be fair they could have done much worse to someone attempting to kidnap a clan heir. They could have set a hyper-caffeinated Naruto on him. And yes, those two words needed to be capitalized. While Dumbledore was pretty much kicked out of the elemental countries and essentially banned from Konoha until further notice, Snape opted to take his long overdue sabbatical. This was mostly due in part to Anko, who he was rather delighted to learn shared several interests. I.e. poisons, snakes, torturing random students until they whimper for mercy. Shino and Naruto shivered at how alike they were. So you finally found out what that secondary power is? Asked Shibi. According to Snape-san, it's called magic. And from what he has been able to tell, I have quite a bit of it waiting to be used. What about that old man who came here? Dumble something. Shino's look soured. Dumbledore. He apparently came here to kidnap me, but since he only had a vague description he couldn't find me. It didn't help that the identifying markers he used were covered up. Eyes and scar. He should have used more than that. Scars are an occupational hazard when one is a shinobi. And the one he was looking for is usually covered over by a headband at the very least, said Shino dryly. So what now? Asked Naruto. Well, Snape has opted to wait until next year before returning. And chances are very high that more people from the outside will come to Konoha for me. The only difference is that they won't try to kidnap me like the old man, said Shino. Who? Asked Haku. She was rather protective of her boyfriend. Adoptive uncles. One couldn't adopt me because of politics and the other was framed. It doesn't hurt that while his papers are out of date, he is more than willing to share poison recipes with the Anbu, said Shino. That, more than anything, had spared Snape from dealing with the Tea and First Corps. Plus there was an open offer to become a citizen if he ever wanted. While the days whittled down to the final part of the Chunin exam, Shino found a rather interesting problem awaiting him. And his name was Jiraiya. Shino had some interest in sealing. But Jiraiya was still miffed about the hot spring incident. So he tried another tactic. He had Naruto ask him. Shino was one of the rare people who had figured out why Naruto resembled the fourth Hokage so much. But had been banned by the Hokage himself from telling Naruto. Even after the boy learned that he was the container for the nine-tailed fox, he still had no clue who his parents were. Which really didn't sit too well with Shino. Eventually, after a week of pestering him, Jiraiya agreed to teach Shino a bit about sealing. Only when he wasn't training Naruto to use the Kyuubi's chakra, of course. Shino was trying not to run for his life when his mother had announced what their Saturday movie night would be. Of all the lame romances his mother loved, Shino loathed Twilight the most. He had actually read the books, just to see what the hype was about. And after giving the series to Haku, he had hated it. Especially Breaking Dawn. Naruto had heard his complaints about the series more than once. The fight scenes were half-assed, and the entire series was based on the hit and miss dating of two stalkers, one of which turned vampires into complete wimps. Only, the werewolves acted like the creatures they were. It was revolting. Shino wasn't the only person to think so either. A good portion of the male shinobi population, Sasuke and Shino spearheading the Genins, thought the series was boring. Alas, the Kunoichi populations kept the books on the shelves, mostly in retaliation to the Ika Ika series. If Shino believed that getting rid of Jiraiya and his porn books would get rid of the Twilight Saga, he would have killed him and burned the books in a heartbeat. Sasuke would help. Anko, on the other hand, had won the contest the Kunoichi had for the most creative use of the audio books. She used it to torture the straight males who came through the T and I division on charges. Within a few hours of listening to that, they were singing like canaries. Snape included. Mother, do we really have to watch that? Asked Shino in a whine. She gave him a look, and he withheld his whimper. She had every single movie, except the new Breaking Dawn, an S. He was forcing them to have a movie marathon. Shibi was partially to blame for this torture, as he had forced her to watch all 6 Star Wars movies in a row. Shino always chose the Princess Fuyuki movies, which Naruto loved. If he had to watch Twilight for the next 6 hours, Shino would make his father pay. If Shibi attempted to fall asleep, Shino would kick him or have his girlfriend poke him with a senbon. If he had to suffer through this, Shibi had to suffer. Haku was rather enjoying the movie, while Naruto had lucked out and was drafted into training with Jiraiya for the next 7.5 hours. Shino would have his revenge on Naruto soon enough for abandoning him to the Twilight movie marathon. Suddenly there was a knock at the door, and Shino was quick to go answer it. Shibi shot his son a betrayed look. He hated Twilight too. Yes, Shino asked, trying to hide the relief in his voice. Anything to get away from that torture. The man before him was tawny-haired and rather tired-looking. Shino's bugs seemed confused about whether he was a man or a wolf. Shino took a gamble and guessed that this was Remus Lupin based on the description Snape had given him. Excuse me, but is this the Aburame compound? He asked tiredly. Are you Remus Lupin? He asked in return. How did you? Snape was very good at describing you during his rants about the Marauders, Shino answered bluntly. Remus winced. So Snape is here. Dumbledore was bitching about that for the past week, said Remus nervously. Just out of curiosity, have you been cleared to enter the village yet? By cleared you mean? A tiny ray of hope began to bloom in him. Here was a chance to rescue his father from the hellish movie marathon without angering his mother. Hold on a minute. Shino quickly went back in, and while the movie was paused, explained why he needed his father to come with him. His mother frowned, but even she had to admit it would look better for the civilian if a clan head decided to stick up for his presence. Shino then did something that had Haku glaring at him. He threw her to his mother and said they could spend the time uninterrupted and get to know each other better. Haku gave him a look and mouthed, "You are so dead." He would live with the aftermath later. You do realize she's going to kill you for that, said Chibi amused. I'll learn to live with the payback. I'll have to deal with an angry girlfriend sooner or later, Shino pointed out. Remus coughed behind them, and Shino shot him a look. Something the matter? Fire Country is a bit warmer than I'm used to. Shino shrugged. I should thank you. You just rescued us from 7 hours of absolute torture. Remus raised an eyebrow. My wife was forcing us to watch all 3 of the Twilight movies that were out, Chibi clarified. Remus seemed surprised. They weren't that bad. A bit too much teenage angst, but I thought they were decent enough. Chibi and Shino stopped cold and looked at him in absolute disbelief. Shino was the first to ask what running through their heads at that moment. You aren't by any chance gay, are you? Remus sputtered. I'm not gay. Then why for the love of Inari, did you say that you actually liked that awful series, Within the Village? Asked Shino. What's so bad about it? It's a romance novel about teenage stalkers and wimpy vampires. The only ones that were actually worth noting were Jasper and Alice, said Shino bluntly. Remus choked. As it stands, Haku and I are firmly Team Jacob, continued Shino. As am I. He was the only one that actually made sense. Though that bit about him falling for the Damphir was a bit tacky, said Chibi. So where are we going? To see Anko. Talk to her for an hour and you get unrestricted access to the public places, eh? And you won't have an Anbu following you everywhere you go, said Shino. This is becoming a habit. Perhaps we should make a sign for people to see Anko immediately if coming from the outside. So why is Twilight so universally hated here? Asked Remus, breaking the silence. It's not hated so much as avoided utterly and completely by every straight male within a 50-kilometer radius of the village. Only the girls like it. And even then the guys avoid people who like the main characters. They generally turn out to be stalkers anyway, said Chibi bluntly. Well, with the exception of Hinata, I think. She likes it well enough. But I'm trying to convert her to the more sane Ika Ika series. You do realize that if you ever succeeded in that her father would kill you. Who said it was for her? I'm hoping to see her tackle Naruto into a snogging session, said Shino deadpan. I admit no knowledge of those books you have on your shelf, and frankly I'm amazed your mother hasn't seen through that genjutsu on them, said Chibi. Signed copies, and I only read them while bored. At least I don't act like Kakashi, displaying them in public. What is Ika Ika? Asked Remus. He had found their conversation rather amusing and comforting. He could tell by the boy's scent that it was his pup, though it was rather muted by the scent of bugs and lightning. It was somewhat comforting to Kay. Now that his pup had been accepted in what appeared to be a military village and had a family who clearly loved him more than Petunia ever would have. He honestly didn't care that Shino was training to be a mercenary. As long as he was happy, healthy and not being abused in any way, he could live with that. Sirius could too, if he hadn't betrayed them. Remus spent an hour with what appeared to be a female Snape, only slightly crazier, and was cleared to stay in the village. Normally he wouldn't have had to deal with Anko, but the fact was that he had been in contact with Dumbledore recently and they wanted to make sure he didn't cause problems. Paranoid, but not to extremes. Huh, so this old guy knew your birth parents? Asked Naruto. Shino was treating them to ramen, courtesy of an Anbu, who should have kept his mouth shut about Naruto. Even now, There were people who looked down on him for no reason other than what he contained. "I'm not that old," protested Remus. He was one booth over. He had mostly gone to Ichiraku because Shino had recommended their ramen to him, and he was curious. Naruto was more interested in Remus than training, so they moved over to join him. He seemed rather happy for the company. While they were eating, Remus seemed somewhat shocked at the sheer amount Naruto was able to eat. Shino carefully broached the subject about magic. Remus was more than happy to discuss it, though he was careful not to talk about the school unless asked. Shino was rather fascinated with magic in general, since he had limited success actually using it. Hand signs were, sad to say, almost useless when it came to magic. About the only thing Shino had really been able to do with his was the silent teleport, which Remus identified as apparition. He was rather interested in Shino's way, because it wasn't nearly as loud. Naruto followed as best he could, but he was eager to see what Remus called magic. So Remus turned the boy's hair a bright neon orange. Naruto, when he realized the change, grinned like the fox container he was. "Cool, can I see that stick you used?" he practically begged. "It's a wand, and only if you don't break it." Remus handed his wand over, and was very startled to see orange sparks come out the end. "What was that?" asked Shino. "It would seem your brother has magic as well." "I wasn't expecting that. I wonder who else in the village has magic?" asked Shino. "Good question," said Naruto. "This is my personal opinion of the series. I really hated that Breaking Dawn built up that fight scene and then wimped out. Total letdown. Alright folks, I have a question for you. What should Shino's animagi form be? I'm stuck on this, and I'm tempted to either make him a butterfly, a cat, or worse, Mothra. I have absolutely no idea what to make him, so it's up to you, the readers, to decide. The unofficial poll will end after Shino reaches Hogwarts. And don't worry, he's only staying for a year. Chapter 9. As it turned out, at least 5 others had magic. Hinata, Haku, Sasuke, Anko, and Kakashi all had more than a small spark of the stuff. Shino was thanking every deity he knew that Haruno wasn't among those with magic. Shino really didn't want to go to Hogwarts. The village could easily hire tutors and create a secondary academy for those with magic, which was what the Hokage and Shibi were going to bring up during the next clan meeting. Chances were very good that the council would either create a new academy or add to existing classes. Shino worked with Remus and Snape to develop the magic he could already access. Snape had a good idea where to start. Remus had absolutely no idea that Snape was a wind elementalist. Shino was unamused by the fact that Sasuke was late. Then again, he was probably still with Kakashi, the man of 1,000 excuses. Shino had spent some time under Kakashi once his element was discovered, but had developed the unique use of his spark fly technique on his own. Kakashi was still cursing about that. Shino waited until the tournament began, and then prepared to fight Temari. Since working with Snape for 2 weeks, the man was a hard taskmaster like Anko, who was very pleased that Shino never once complained about how hard he was pushing him. Shino had finally figured out why he had gotten a response for the wind chakra. It wasn't because he was a wind user like Naruto. It was because he was a wind elemental. His magic worked naturally around winds, which was why the paper had been shredded. It also explained why any wind technique he used blew up in his face. His chakra nature was fire and lightning. Temari wasn't too happy to be facing the bug boy. The second the battle started, she took to the air. Shino grinned under his collar. Time to put his new magic trick to the test. Using a variation of the wind disc Naruto loved to use, he had figured out how to make it move, and used it to zoom around the village at high speeds to the annoyance of the Anbu. Shino took to the skies. Shino couldn't maintain one large disc, so he settled for 2 small ones directly under his feet. Temari's eyebrows rose, impressed. Soon it deteriorated into a game of cat and mouse, with Temari avoiding every wave of bug sent at her. It didn't help that a majority of Shino's hive had wings. Shino had her in the crosshairs. His moths were about to strike, using the powders he had coated on their wings. Temari was sneezing, big time, but she refused to let Shino beat her. Eventually the allergies she didn't realize she had made themselves known, and she forfeited while she could still breathe. She was taken directly to the medic nin to get some medicine. She wouldn't stop sneezing for a good 15 minutes, and even then she had to get medication. The Hokage had pushed Naruto's match to the end. Because he knew the boy very well. He was a bit enthusiastic with his jutsu. Hinata beat Ino by combining her newly discovered magic with the gentle fist. Sasuke nearly got disqualified by arriving far too late but ended up beating Lee after stealing a good majority of his tricks, and everyone was awaiting Naruto and Gaara's match. Shino passed the time by talking to Naruto. There's something that's been bugging me. How did this aunt of yours get into the village and leave without an infant? Actually, I've wondered that myself. You would think that after the Kyuubi attack, the village sentries would be more observant for the next 5 years. According to the logs, she entered under the guise of visiting her cousin, and left within a few hours. I suppose they assumed he left the infant with the cousin or something, said Shino. He had checked, after finally getting a name for the person who had abandoned him. What Shino wanted to know was why this Petunia Dursley was going to a woman named Kushina. He was going to ask the Hokage for a blood test once this test was over with. The woman's last name had been Uzumaki. Gaara was not in a good mood. On one hand, he was somewhat loyal to his village. On the other hand, he had actually made friends that wouldn't abandon him in a village he was ordered to destroy. He didn't know why his father decided to join up with a village that was relatively new. Something was off about that. If his father really wanted to improve village relations, he should have signed a peace treaty with the Leaf or Mist. The sound Yaj was so new that very few people had even heard of them, let alone trusted them to get the job done right. And then there was the way his father had been acting for the past few weeks. Something was very off about him. Unfortunately, unless he could prove it, he still had to go on with the plan. Shino and Naruto at least had kept him company during the night, when they were taking a few hours off of training. They had made the lack of sleep much more bearable. Naruto started off with a bang, and Gaara didn't even have to sweat to keep up with him. It wasn't until Naruto used the same telephone e-port trick Shino had learned that things grew nasty. Naruto had yet to figure out how to do it silently, but that really didn't matter too much. It got him past Gaara's ultimate defense long enough to land a solid blow. Startled by the sudden contact, Gaara felt something wet coming from his nose. Touching it, he was absolutely shocked to see the same shade of red as his hair coming from his nose. He was bleeding. Unable to comprehend such an occurrence, Gaara's mind snapped. His perfect defense enveloped him, and he began to lose control of Shukaku. This set off a chain reaction in the stands. The Cage's hand slipped into the seal of the ram, and feathers descended into the seats. Only those who could recognize a genjutsu escaped. Shino was the only one to notice one of the Anbu acting oddly. So it was only natural that he reacted accordingly. Kabuto really wasn't expecting someone to see through his disguise so quickly. Especially when that someone had one of the creepiest attacks he had ever seen. He dodged the wave of insects Shino sent at him, inwardly sweating. It was pretty obvious to him what Shino planned to do. He was going to drain his chakra and help the Hokage, who was currently stuck under the barrier. Suddenly one of the beetles latched onto his skin, and he could feel his chakra being drained. He tried to crush it, only to see Shino coming at him with Kakashi's signature technique. He honestly didn't know that Shino had learned that particular trick. He had thought the current animosity towards the Aburame heir would have kept Kakashi from showing him. Actually, Shino had seen Sasuke practice with it without either of them knowing, and once he had the basic gist of the Chidori he had tried it himself. It took him a full week to be able to pull it off. It would have been a few days. But Shino didn't want Kakashi to know that he could spy using his spark flies. Kabuto quickly found himself on the wrong end of an Aburame, and narrowly avoided the blow. Only to discover Kakashi behind him, somewhat amused at Shino. "When did you steal my jutsu?" he asked mildly. "Roughly 2 weeks ago." "Why?" "Just curious." Kabuto felt like swearing, as Kakashi effectively pinned him long enough for Shino to absorb nearly all his chakra. He was so in for it if the invasion didn't succeed. Remus was already next to the Hokage when Shino arrived. Remus had been talking to Kakashi about his dog summons when the genjutsu hit. Kakashi had been nice enough to lift it from the werewolf, who was eager to help. Remus rather liked Konoha, When informed of his condition, the Hokage had him stay in the forest of death with the large snakes to keep him from leaving until sunrise. Also to keep the tigers from making a snack of him, lol. Finding such easy acceptance after living in the magical communities where he was shunned was rather refreshing. He was seriously considering moving here to teach the students magic. The Hokage had certainly hinted that they were planning on extra classes. Since Remus was already past the barrier, chakra and magic didn't mix that well unless the person was trained with both. Shino went to help Naruto, who had run after Gaara. Something told him this would be a battle worth remembering. Snape was actually grinning as he used the Levicorpus spell to immobilize the shinobi coming at him. Enko was more than happy to take advantage of the flying targets. The two of them made a rather formidable tag team. While he made sure the shinobi would be easy pickings, Shibi was making sure the man didn't get hit with a kunai or shuriken. It wouldn't do to have one of Shino's magical instructors killed while helping defend the village. One would think that the shinobi would duck if they saw a spell coming at them. There were a few that were invisible to the naked eye. Snape was making very good use of those. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.